All right, I need to dispel something right out of the gates. I'm going to start out the show with, as Sean would say, I think it's on Fridays, I need to air a grievance. And I need to dispel a misconception. I'm a fun guy. I'm a fun guy. I don't get enough credit for how much fun I am. I didn't have time to dress up today. I had a busy morning, some adulting, all right? And if our staff here at Broadway Media wants me to continue to do this 4-hour radio show, which is a ratings juggernaut, and brings in business to pay salaries.
You can say that again.
I don't have time to dress up and come in early to enjoy myself. But that doesn't mean I'm not fun. I want it known across our community starting today that when you hear the name Spence Checketts, you think fun.
Fun guy.
I didn't have time to dress up. That doesn't make me someone who doesn't like fun. Porter, you know this. We've talked about it. When people come up to you on the street and they're like, hey, tell me about Spence. Better looking in person, in shape for his age, good hair. That's enough. Good hairline.
That was a compliment.
And a lot of fun. And he's a fun guy, right? Those are the things you say.
That was a compliment. You're looking good.
Thank you. But also, I'm fun.
You're fun. You're fun.
Thank you.
And listen, you don't have to dress up for Halloween to be fun. Okay? As you can see, I'm wearing a black T-shirt and black sweats today.
You look like you're dressed up as a bandit.
Well,
somebody who just robbed a Sev or something.
That might not be a costume.
All right, fair enough.
But I also had a busy morning. Sorry. Yeah. I was at the DMV all day.
Oh.
So I didn't have enough time. And I'm not going to go home and just like put on a cowboy hat. That's not a costume.
It's not.
That's just what I wear on the weekend. So
yeah.
I'm not dressing up. I'm fun too. Sometimes.
We're both fun. 877-353-0700. Text in how much fun this show is.
It is. This show's fun.
We'll give you a gift card or something. A fun gift card to do something fun from the most fun people on air in the market.
I would say so.
877-353-0700. I'm a little irritated that I've been painted as somebody who doesn't like fun. I like fun.
You had a bad night last night also.
Also, the Yankees just completely handed it over. That fifth inning meltdown was pathetic. Hello, how are you? The name of this radio program is called The Fun Drive with Spence Checketts. I'm the host. That young man produces it. And let's get on track. All right, busy show. We'll do a little World Series. Honestly, that was just pathetic. And Yankees had game 1 in their hands. They blew it. Yankees had game 5 in their hands. Blew it. Just a total meltdown. And I wonder if Aaron Boone keeps his job. I'm dead serious. Interesting article. Up at The Athletic. I'm going to find it because I need to credit the writer because I don't smash as much regular season baseball as I used to. You know, when you do this job, you try to put your energy in places that your audience really wants. And I don't know that baseball moves the needle here like it used to, but playoff baseball is awesome. The World Series was at least intriguing. I'm sure Major League Baseball, the powers that be at the governing body, very thrilled with massive numbers, the biggest ratings the World Series has had in a long time. And ultimately, you get the 2 biggest media markets in the world. You get L.A. and you get New York. You get 2 of the best brands in Major League Baseball. You get the Yankees and the Dodgers. And then you had, I'll say, 5 somewhat compelling games. The Dodgers were better. They deserve it. The Yankees did not deserve to win last night. And just a comedy of errors. But that piece in The Athletic outlined, like, essentially, and I can understand this because watching the Yankees in the playoffs prior to the World Series, it felt like they had such a powerful lineup. And then when they faced the Dodgers had the best lineup in baseball, and quite frankly have for quite a while. It's got like a decade of Dodger dominance. They only had 1 World Series win, and it was COVID, so it felt kind of hollow. So well-deserved by that organization. I don't know what the Yankees are going to do. Juan Soto came out today and was like, yeah, I'm open to every club. He's just going to go to the highest bidder, as most players do as they get a little bit older. But fifth inning meltdown, I don't know that Aaron Boone keeps his job. So maybe we'll do a little World Series, but mostly we have the local stuff to get into. Great night for the Utah Hockey Club, a bounce-back win against Calgary, 5-1 there for the Utah Hockey Club. They got their offense back. Good to see Sergachev on a power play goal. Gunther got his 6th of the year. The Utah Jazz welcome in Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs. The Jazz are now the only team in the NBA that have not won a game, and I'll tell you, I'm here for it. 0 for 82. Please just do what you have to do to maintain your draft capital to try to get a legitimate good piece in the draft next year. Only 4 NBA games tonight, the NBA TV night, as it's known around people who watch basketball. Milwaukee, Memphis, and then Phoenix and the LA Clippers. Houston, Dallas go at it. Then, of course, the aforementioned Spurs-Jazz game at the Delta Center. So head on down if you want to see some Jazz basketball. Inching closer and closer to the next game for Real Salt Lake. It's do or die for RSL in Minnesota. After really screwing the pooch a little bit, not being able to find a goal here in Salt Lake on Tuesday, they're going to have to try to make a miracle happen on the road against Minnesota. So we'll get to a little RSL, and obviously a ton of attention on the weekend ahead in both local and college football. Excuse me, I should say college and pro football, because locally, both Utah and BYU are on buys. But we do have a lot of great college football games from a national perspective. Ohio State, Penn State, probably top of mind. We've got Michigan and Oregon at the Big House. Your NFL weekend starts tonight with another embarrassing team of mine, the New York Football Jets, and their quarterback known as Throw Rogan, taking on the Texans. The Jets are actually a favorite. Texans are a little bit banged up. They lost Stephon Diggs, although I do think Nico Collins is going to play. We'll update you on that, of course, after we say goodnight. You can hear the Jets and the Texans as we are your home of the NFL in this market. All right, good guest list. Excited for this today. We've got Pablo Mastroianni. I was told Pablo's not doing media. We're the only show that's going to get Pablo, my guy Pops, between the loss on Tuesday and the match on Saturday. So we're going to do that right out of the gates. Then we're going to bring in Craig Bolerjack and Gordon Monson live in studio for the Big Show Big Hour. Brought to you by Big O Tires. Danny Cannell, haven't caught up with my guy DK from NY. That's an inside joke. He actually did a rap once. You can Google Danny Cannell, DK in NY when he was playing for the Giants. He recorded a rap. Wasn't great, but, you know, I appreciate the effort. Cannell stops by later. Do you think you can prepare the DK in NY bump when we bring Danny on?
I think we did that once, and I don't know that he was, like, as excited about it as I thought he might be.
Okay, secondary.
Did we do that?
Yeah, we may have. And look, it was rather, it's not great. As a backup, can you prepare Gordon Hayward Too Big Yo?
Oh, Too Big Yo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for Cannell. White guys should never rap unless your name is Eminem. I mean, the list is like one.
There's a short select few.
Who else? If you say Macklemore, then I'm going.
I kind of like Mac Miller.
May he rest in peace.
Not Macklemore.
Yes, he was a good talent. So we'll bring in Cannell in to talk a little college football. So NFL, college football, RSL, some jazz, and some NBA on a Thursday. Our first guest will be Pablo Mastroianni. But before we get to my guy Pops, courtesy of Standard Restaurant Supply. Check them out at standardrestaurant.com or stop by their convenient location at 3500 South. They are your tailgate headquarters. Time now for your opening tip. So, as we've talked about all week, it just feels odd. It's the ever-changing landscape of college athletics to have both Utah and BYU football on buys for the second time this year. Now, of course, for the first time this year, Utah and BYU will do battle coming up next Saturday here in Salt Lake City at Rice-Eccles Stadium. 8:15 tip, Porter will get going at 4:15. Porter, do we have a quick tease for the pregame coverage of the rivalry game we're going to see next week, Utah-BYU football?
Yeah, actually going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be up at the it's kind of a coat drive, I guess, for the NFL Players Association. We're going to be up at the tailgate with Nate Orchard, with Stevenson Sylvester, Isaac Asiata, Jordan Wynn, and a collection of friends from down south as well. Trying to gather a bunch of coats for the upcoming winter and preparing for football. So I'll have like an assortment of both BYU and Utah former players that are stopping by each and every segment, but live from the tailgate, and hopefully have folks that can bring their extra coats. I'll tease that as we get closer.
For sure. Make sure to come early and check out the tailgate. It's a lot of fun. I'll be up there. It's going to be a late kick, so we'll all be at the stadium very late. And, of course, as we've discussed, the cruel irony for Ute fans up in this part of the world who not just cover, but care about the University of Utah is that literally every single thing that we thought would happen this year for Utah football is happening about 40 miles down south. So BYU rolls up next week with a ton of confidence, with a ton of momentum. And honestly, even though they're not being front-facing about it, because whenever Kalani talks, he will never show his hand. And he's only going to talk about his respect and love for his mentor and former boss, former head coach, that is Kalani Sitake. Kyle Whittingham, of course, Kalani, Jay, and A-Rod, part of that 2008 unbeaten Utah team that went to the Sugar Bowl and beat Alabama. But make no mistake, and, talking to some people off air who've been listening to the program and, kind of chime in with their take, that group will roll up here super motivated, and don't think for a second that if it gets loose, and there are a lot of people that think it will, the line has moved just a little bit. BYU just a slight favorite. It opened up at 4. You can get it at about 2.5 or 2, but it'll continue to move, between now and next Saturday. And obviously, early on in the season, line movement was a little bit of a telltale sign about who we would see under center for Utah football coming up, whether it was Cam or Isaac. We just followed the line, and suddenly it would spike like 5 points. We're like, oh, I guess Cam's still hurt. Coach Witt addressed the media and talked about, and kind of here we go again. I understand that people are feeling like this, but it will be Isaac Wilson and Brandon Rose splitting the first team reps. Although Kyle himself said that Isaac has been playing injured. That feels a little bit like the Jazz after they lost to the Clippers in the playoffs. And they're like, yeah, Rudy and Donovan were actually hurt. Well, why didn't you say anything before the series? You just lost. So I can't speak to it. I have no idea. I mean, I think it is safe to say that Isaac looked better early on when he had reps against Southern Utah, Baylor, Utah State, Oklahoma State. Obviously, none of those teams are awesome. I think Baylor has been a little bit better as of late, but Isaac did look better against the competition early on prior to, Arizona. This didn't look great. And then after Cam goes out against ASU, didn't look great. Of course, the offense over the past 4 games has been anemic by most any measurable metric. They are one of the bottom 3 offenses in the Big 12. And ultimately, what BYU seems to do well is kind of like the perfect formula for a game that could get a little bit loose for Utah football coming up next week. As of right now, it appears BYU is as healthy as you can possibly be at this point of the season. Connor Pay apparently is still in a walking boot, but there's some rumblings, some rumors that he may be ready for the Utah football game. Even with Connor on the sideline, that offensive line has been really good, both protecting Jake and opening up holes for, any of their running backs. They have 5 backs that have had 21 carries or more, and that doesn't even include Miles Davis, who's at 18. That's where they've been injured a little bit, but LJ looks healthy. He looks ready. Hinckley Rapati looks healthy. He looks ready, and Jake can run it as well. So Utah football, you're really going to have to get back to what we've all become accustomed to as far as watching a team whose head coach is Kyle Whittingham. And look, the narrative that the defense isn't good is not fair. The metrics do indicate that Utah's defense is elite. Now, I do take a little bit of an issue with people who have blamed the areas of the defense that aren't necessarily proficient, which is odd. And Kyle actually talked about this during his media availability. Utah football is not turning the other team over, and they're not pressuring the quarterback. And in order to beat BYU, you're going to have to pressure Jake, and you're probably going to have to capitalize. Because here's one thing about Jake. He still does have those moments. And I'm not knocking on the kid because he's been incredible. The preseason predictions had him among the worst quarterbacks in the Big 12. Jake has talked about this himself as he keeps screenshots on his phone to use as motivation. And no matter how you spin it, no matter how you look at it, he's gone from being expected to be one of the worst quarterbacks in the conference to undeniably being one of, if not the best. Certainly up there with anyone you're going to talk about. So you're going to have to pressure him. And even though Jake has been really good, he still has those moments where he makes those mistakes in those throws where some of them turn into turnovers. BYU's been a little bit fortunate to not have a lot of them come back and bite them, but his decision-making has been better. And hopefully Utah football on the defensive side will be healthier than they ever have been. Luckily, obviously it sucks to hear about Monty Parks who's out for the year, but I don't believe anyone on the defense outside of the early injury at corner has been deemed to be out for the year. So hopefully not just Connor O'Toole being back, but Connor O'Toole looking right. Early on in the season, Connor was a beast. causing a lot of chaos in the backfield. Then he went down with the injury. Getting Karene back and hopefully back in better game shape coming up, because obviously you cannot replicate a game, and you can't replicate a game like this because it does get weird more often than not. But Utah football, as of now in the Big 12, number 2 in scoring defense, number 1 in total defense, number 3 in rushing defense, number 2 in passing defense, number 5 in efficiency. They're the best defensive team on both first and third down, but they're 11th in sacks. They're 15th in fumbles forced. They're 16th in fumbles recovered. Remember, there's only 16 teams in this league. They're 9th in interceptions, but ultimately they're number 1 in red zone defense. So most of the metrics still indicate that this defense is something you guys can hang your hat on if you're looking for something to kind of keep that faith alive for the final 4 games of the year. Because as we've talked about, and as we'll continue to talk about, yes, this team will always be remembered as what could have been. And, oh, my gosh, how did we all get it so wrong? But you can make your mark on this community with a special moment and a special game in the rivalry game against BYU. You can be remembered forever, even if this team will not be remembered in the way that we all thought we would talk about them. All right, Pablo Mastroianni is going to join us coming up next. Right out of the gates, we're going to bring in Pablo. But let me tell you about Prize Picks, okay? It's the best place to get real money, sports action. Over 10 million members, billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. So it's the easiest way. If you've ever just wanted to dip your toe in the water, but you hear people talking about the point spread and the over-under and the money line and 3 and a hook. Like, you don't have to learn any of the verbiage, and you probably don't want to anyway. Like, don't go down that rabbit hole. With Prize Picks, it's so much easier. For instance, Jazz Spurs tonight, Lowry Markkanen, more or less than 21.5 points, right? Victor Wembanyama, more or less than 3.5 blocks. And then you pick more or less on 2 player stat projections. And if you get those right, that's how you win money. And I've done it because they gave me some promotional cash as part of being a client. I've turned $20 and $180 because it's just not that hard. So download the app, use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. So download the Prize Picks app today. It's in the App Store, Google Play Store. It's free. Use the promo code ESPN700. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Check it out. See if you like it. Maybe you can win some cash. Our friends at Prize Picks run your game all season long. Pablo Mastroianni, our first guest on Thursday, right here on ESPN 700. I know fall is about football for a lot of you, and certainly it is for us, but it's also about football or soccer, whatever you want to call it. I'm not judging. Playoff soccer in MLS is dramatic, it is intense, and it continues on Saturday after a rough one on Tuesday. Our next guest, the head coach of RSL, good enough to take some time during the game week, Pablo Mastroeni on a Thursday. Pobs, happy Thursday, man. How we doing?
Happy Thursday, Spence. Doing well, man.
I appreciate the time. So when we had you on last, and I'm only speaking for myself here, I said from my soccer pea brain, it felt like Minnesota is scared to play with you, and they just want to sit back and try to counter a little bit, and that's what they did. And it just feels like getting a goal in that scenario is really, really tough because getting a goal, period, is really, really tough. As you look back and as you've studied the film, what would you point out today that stood in the way from you guys finding just one solution in order to get that win?
Yeah, no, I think, Minnesota has been a really good defensive team, and the commitment they put towards, playing behind the ball and the commitment they get from 11 makes it extremely difficult. And when we create, in soccer, there's a stat called big chances. And in that game at the weekend, we created 3 big chances. And essentially it's you and the goalkeeper and we didn't finish those 3 chances. So it's not the volume of chances you're going to create against them, but it is the quality of the chance that you're going to create and then just finishing. And so, what I said post game was like making a play. And to be fair, their goalkeeper made a play on 3 of our big chances. And so it's just, and the key to that is if you score a goal, their whole plan is kind of thrown out the window, and now they have to open themselves up, and now they have to extend themselves. And we've done really, really well against teams that open up or press. And what we've struggled is really being intricate in our play in tight spaces. And so looking back, there's a couple things that we're gonna do with possession deeper in our build to hopefully create some space between the lines to then be able to exploit those spaces with pace. Because again, if you break lines and you penetrate their midfield line, but then you take your first touch backwards, you allow the rest of their team to get back, and what they are is committed to getting back. And so it's not about the amount of chances that you create as much as it is taking advantage of the good chances that you create on goal. And again, for us, it's going to be scoring the first goal. And that's what we've been working towards. While it's not obviously giving up the defensive side, because obviously the feeling is that we have to go score the goal. But if you concede against these guys, now you have to score 2, and then that's not the game that we want to play.
So again, you'll have to forgive my ignorance. The only time I've seen Minnesota is when you played them, and it does feel like, from my recollection, they do play the same regardless of venue. Are you anticipating that same style in their place coming up on Saturday?
Yeah, their coach made an interesting comment after the game, and one of our best chances came when they came out to press us, and we broke through their whole team and created a good chance on goal. And he made a reference to, we're at our worst when we're opened up. And so for me, just that comment alone after that game speaks volumes to what they're going to do. They feel like, well, if we take it to penalty kicks, we feel good about our chances. We have a game to play with. The onus is on Salt Lake to come out and make the game. And what they're really good at, because they've been playing this way for quite some time, is the counterattack. And so the expectation for us is that they're going to play the same way, wait for their moments. And if they don't, I think we have an advantage where we feel really comfortable with teams exposing themselves, bringing players forward, and then us being able to break lines and create more quality opportunities on goal.
Okay, so let's dig into some lineup decisions here, because, and again, this is just me asking, pontificating aloud, and wondering kind of what the motivation was. So we had Matt Crooks on a couple days ago, and I asked Matt straight up, like, where do you think
the conversation with Diogo is the same as I'll explain to you now, is it's just understanding the role on both sides of the ball really clearly. And I think that's where Matt has an edge. And for me, going, with a guy that has 10 months of experience playing with this group, going through some good times, going through some tough times, it's just the familiarity that I have with Crooks in that position. And then you can look at other positions and go, okay, so then how can we adjust it? But with Crooks, he is the glue to our team. And like you rightly pointed out, you're not going to see it in the stats, but the way he's been linking with Andreas and the way he's been linking with Dom, who he played into, create one of our best chances of the game against Minnesota, is too important to leave him off the field. And then the other part with Crooks against a team like Minnesota, who play for set pieces and they're huge, is also that what he brings on set pieces from just an aerial ability. And so those are some of the decisions, that went in, when I'm explaining things to Diogo as to why I'm going with Matt Crooks. And the other part of that is Diogo has had his best moments for us when he's come into games. So the game against Austin and the game against Portland, those are two games that he scored in, and he's coming into the game when the game's a bit tired. There's a little bit more space, and he's got an eye for goal. And so always having that in your back pocket is just as important as picking the starting team. Is who are the guys that are going to come in if the game state is such. And so those are the conversations I had with both those guys.
Okay. Now you elected to, later on in the game, bring on Diogo, and you decided to take off Diego Luna. Now, for my money, Pablo, Diego, and this is just me, kind of witnessing and watching, I feel like Diego might be in the best form of any of the attacking players right now. So take us. Okay, so take us through that decision. Why you ended up bringing in Diogo in place of Diego Luna.
Yeah, because Diego Luna was cramping.
Oh, okay.
And so again, no, these are really good questions because again, if you just look at it from peripheral, you'll have no idea as to all the different variables that go into making these decisions. So Diego was cramping. He's had a cold for a couple days. And again, when you're in the playoffs, it's not like we can wait and see if you can get through it. It's more about how do we keep the same level of intensity on both sides of the ball. And so the decision with Diego Luna was nothing more than he was cramping and just wanted to make sure that we had legs to finish out the game the right way.
Now, I got to follow up. How's he feeling? Obviously, if it's only cramps, that's plenty of time to recover for Saturday.
Yeah. So again, I think the cramping piece comes from probably taking the meds, right? So if you're sick and you got the sniffles and you're taking things that are going to stop you up from doing that, naturally you're taking water out of the system and it's not functioning the right way. Talked to him this morning and he says he feels great. So that's a real positive heading into the weekend.
So Julio Anderson comes in for Crooks, for Maddie. And honestly, when I saw Anderson warming up, I thought you were going to take Chicho off because he just continues to struggle to find. And look, he spoiled us. I want to be very clear. Like, this is his fault. The reason we're all mad is because he spoiled us. He shouldn't have had the start to the season that he had. So
you're exactly right. Yeah. Expectations are what leads to disappointment.
100%, man. Hope kills us all. I know you've never seen Ted Lasso, but I did, and that was the line there. So Julio for Crooks instead of Chicho. Take us through that.
Yeah, no, I think it's the same thing. I'm hanging on the same thing. I think everyone is if there's one guy that can create a moment of brilliance out of nowhere, it's Chicho, and he doesn't need to be necessarily. Like early in the season, he might have had games where he wasn't necessarily playing the best, but in the right moment, if there's anyone on this team that you want on the ball, whether it's at midfield or 30 yards out or a free kick, I'm hanging on the same hope as everyone else is. Like, when is this, curse going to be taken? When is he going to step into the limelight? And so that was the thought behind that. And then obviously, what we realized again with Ando going out there and exposing some of their deficiencies in the back line is we need to move their back line a lot more than we did. And the only way to do that is to play behind the line. In other words, looking for balls to get in behind. And that's not Chicho's strength. And just thought that Chicho's a very good passer of the ball. And with Ando running, we'll create some chances. And then the game did open up a little bit there in the second half. But we want to be more consistent with that heading into this next game.
So certainly I would never tell you how to do your job. I will say this. I mean, obviously, if you ever want to come in and do 4 hours of radio, I'll go run training, Pablo. We can do a straight, what do they call that, like for like in soccer? But it felt, right. It felt like when you brought Brody on and pushed Emeka back to, a centralized midfield role, the team looked a little bit different. And look, he's so good, you can move him around, but I mean, it's do or die time, right? So I would imagine moving forward, you'd like Emeka centralized in the midfield, yeah?
Yeah, and again, that's a byproduct of losing Barra for 3 games.
Right.
Just to be fair to Javane, I thought he did a fantastic job filling in for Barra. But again, now from an attacking perspective, we don't have the left foot that can play balls into those areas, from a more comfortable position. And so, yeah, again, coaching is, and oftentimes it's not from a place of ideal, it's from a place of need. And in that particular case, Emeka, we had Emeka out there to start because of how robust and how quick they are on the counter, and making sure that we solidified that. But obviously when Emeka went into the middle of the field, the game changed, and we were able to penetrate centrally with him driving, with him picking up second balls. And so our team is completely different with Emeka in the middle of the field.
So now over to the most unfair media question of all time, because your penalty kick situation before has worked very well. And Justin Glad is the one that scored the game-winning penalty against Seattle. But you know the deal. When it doesn't work, you've got to talk about it. And I've heard from, we've had players on the show and then Dunny on the broadcast. And I believe you yourself, Pablo, have talked about, not wanting to have your, okay, here's my 5, then here's my next 5, and having it scripted, correct? So how do you approach that situation? Kind of explain that to our listeners.
Yeah, no, I did things different, Spence, so I went against my intuition, which is to not have it scripted. And, obviously Chicho Diego or Guy Anderson, and, we had 2 other guys that were going to take one in front of Justin Glad, Alex Katranis and Dominic. And both those guys said that they were cramping and they didn't feel comfortable taking it, right? And so as a coach, then you go to the next one and you say, Jay Glad, are you ready to take one? And he said yes, and so we had our 5 picked out, and Emeka was going to always be 5th. But those are little situations, again, that you have to, those are real time. So even though it was scripted that we had Alex in there, then it's real time. And it's like, yeah, I just don't feel comfortable with my groin. And then Dominic had a calf. And so then we need shooters, right? We need someone to step up. And so, Jay Glad stepped up and unfortunately didn't make his. But again, I think it's all collaborative. It's not just, me going, you're the 5. It's we had a 5. And then when 2 guys kind of pull out, then you have to go to the next guy. And then Ojeda was 6. And so, but that's a part of it. And, that's one of the things I've been talking to the players about is don't confuse the performance with the result, right? Especially when it comes to penalty kicks, because it's really about tapping in a ball from 12 yards out. And for as easy as it is on Tuesday, with 20,000 people in the stadium and walking 50 yards to the ball, it's a lonely place to be. And so if you're not confident, if you don't believe, if you're not hitting the back of the net in your mind before you step up to the ball, that goal becomes a lot smaller and that ball becomes a lot bigger, right? So, we'll work on those again tomorrow. But I think we've seen in the last couple of weeks guys that we feel comfortable, and not that we feel comfortable, that they feel comfortable stepping up and taking a PK if we get to that point.
So let's get into some bright spots from my perspective, and then we'll talk about Saturday. Then I'll set you loose today. Dominic Markzuk, the more and more I watch him, the more and more I feel like there's a lot to like. He created a couple of really, really good chances, one to Diego that I thought the St. Clair kid was good. I mean, you got to tip your cap to their keeper.
Yep.
But I thought Markzuk had a really bright match for you. Tell me what you saw from your vantage point.
Yeah, no, he continues to impress. Again, I think a lot, what you see on Saturday, but for me, it's even deeper. It's a young man that's coming across to a new country for the first time in his life, moving away from his family and all of home, and learning how we want to play, learning what this league is all about, and then exhibiting his skill sets. And I think on offense, his ability to get forward and look for his teammates in dangerous areas has been a real bright spot. And then defensively, his graft to do all the work and it's not always easy in this league because there's a lot of transition, but he seems to, hold his own in that department as well. And so I think with time, there's really hopeful that he will be one of the best wingers in this league. And with every game, I see a player with more and more confidence. And I think that's what, it stifles their attack down the right side when he's aggressive, when he's got the right mindset, when he's winning his duels. And I think he did a great job of that. And so both on the right with, Dominic, and on the left with Katranis it's critical for us to be able to maintain control of the game with and without the ball.
Was proud of Zach. Ultimately, like when he took that to take a shot at that speed in that weather, like he did right off his chest, I was like, well, Zach's dead. They're going to have to, that looked, I mean, if you've ever been hit with a soccer ball, it's not awesome. And I'm sure it's happened to you several times, but I thought he stepped up in a way that silenced a lot of people that have just been crushing him all year. So little kudos to your keeper on a Thursday. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a fantastic performance, and I think, is really interesting because again, the obviously when you don't score a goal, there's not a lot of cheers on the offensive side, but the amount of cheers coming from that side of the stadium every time he made a save was really profound. And again, it gives the guys the boost that they need, right? Because again, game of soccer, it's hard to score goals, and when your keeper is standing on his head back there, and he's basically saying with his performance, "We got this, guys," and it instills belief in the group, and it's not easy, and oftentimes, we talk about giving players confidence, and I think this is a really important point with all players in all sports is the coach gives you confidence by putting you on the field. And you give the coach and the rest of the team confidence by your performance. And so, when Zach was inserted back in the lineup, it wasn't like we had this powwow and like, hey, kumbaya, everything's great. It's go out there and show everyone, right? Go out there and prove that you belong out here. And so that's, behind all the saves that he made at the weekend, I'm just proud of the responsibility he took and the confidence that was derived from inside to show what he's capable of doing when everyone else thought he was that he shouldn't be there. And so I think every game, every training session is an opportunity for players to bring confidence to themselves by the way they apply the work in training, by the way they apply the work in games. And now we have a really confident goalkeeper where, 5-6 weeks ago, you and I were on the phone talking about who's the number one and who's performing great. And now it's clear that Zach is the guy that's ready for the moment.
Jay Glad and Ojeda have been two of your best players all year, and one snapshot PK moment will not define their contributions. Do you say anything to guys in that moment, or do you just kind of let it die and move on and focus on the next?
Yeah, no, I think, again, I don't focus in on that part of it. And like I said earlier, I talk about the performance, and we performed well enough to win that game, and we just got to be sharper. And hope on the day that their goalkeeper isn't as sharp as he was, right? So it's a combination of everything. And so is to make sure that the PK shootout isn't a reflection of the way we performed, and we got to go out and improve our performance, right? But without allowing the emotions of the PK get involved to where it starts to detract from their ability to play in the 90 minutes. And so the focus in the last couple of days has been we've got to win this game in the 90 minutes and being well balanced on defense as well as being sharp on offense. I think we can get to that point. And so listen, there's no lonelier place to be than shooting a PK, missing, and then walking back. And so how quickly, we can take the attention off that and focus on getting back to work and improving the 90 minutes is critical, I think, to the team and to, in particular, those two players' mindsets.
So you're going to luck out a little bit with weather on Saturday. St. Paul's about 59 degrees and no rain, and it's going to rain for 3 days after that. So that's good because with good weather, it means you guys can maybe express yourselves in an attacking way a little bit differently. Let's start with what getting Brian back does for you and kind of where he's at mentally after he's taken a lot of heat, and he deserves it. He knows it. Obviously you and I talked about it, but where's his head at, and what does his re-entry into the lineup mean for you guys on Saturday?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for him and a great moment for us to go back and having Javain on the right and Bear on the left. And obviously he'll pick off where Javain left off with his aggressiveness, his ability to win 1v1 duels, and that's a strength of Vera's. But the other part of Vera, especially against a team that's really stingy defensively, is utilizing him on set pieces and letting that left foot go a little bit more. And he brings that advantage to our group from a set piece perspective. So The other part is, his ability to play a left-footed ball into a channel that kind of curls into the forward versus a right-footed player that's more times than not, the ball starts running towards the sideline from that position. So I think on all sides, on both sides of the ball and all phases of the game, Vera, makes their team a much more competitive group. And then obviously putting Javane on the right allows players to play in positions that they're comfortable in.
All right, last thing, then I'll set you loose. After studying the tape and, as you pointed out earlier in the interview, understanding that Minnesota is going to play the very same way, have you been able to, with your staff, either look at different attacking options in the lineup or looking at different attacking tactics to try to – because I think if you can just get one – I think it would change the entire scope. Then they'll have to engage you. And if they engage you, I have confidence you guys can outplay them. So how do you find that first solution, I guess, is a much easier way of asking it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And I'd say both. So we've identified both, right? Because obviously with the change of tactics and not changing the tactics, but adding wrinkles within the tactics, you're going to rely on players' natural abilities. Right. And so in order to, it's very hard to find spaces to operate and to be and to control the game in that phase as far as creating quality chances. And so for me, it's really about breaking lines and being very aggressive with our attack and disorganizing their back line as opposed to letting them get back into their shape. And so that's going to take a wrinkle in tactics and a change in personnel in order to hopefully achieve what we want, knowing that we have great players to come into the game and make the difference when it opens up.
Well, look, man, I have cleared my calendar on Saturday, November the 8th at 7 o'clock p.m. back here in our market. I'm told tickets are selling fast, so you've got an army back here cheering you on up there. Go get it done, okay?
Let's go, Spence. Appreciate it, bud.
All right, Pablo Mastroeni, head coach of RSL. One more shot to create a moment and find a solution Saturday in Minnesota, 7 o'clock on Apple TV. Unfortunately, there's no radio coverage, which is too bad. All right, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Gordon Monson, Craig Bolerjack, live in studio, coming up next right here on ESPN 700. We've done it once again. We're on a hot streak. That's 2 straight weeks, which is a streak to get all 3 of us in studio. It's time for the big show, Big Hour. Brought to you by Big O Tires. It's their fall into savings sale. You can save up to $120 off a select set of tires. But Big O Tires, they're your one-stop shop for anything you need, automotive repair. Check out their website, bigotires.com, to find a location near you. Craig Bolerjack, Gordon Monson. Gentlemen, happy Halloween. How are we doing?
Yeah, it's good to see you guys, and I just want to know that this all happened because, we got Gordon in 2 straight weeks with a special NIL deposit in his account.
Oh, that's good, because I was afraid he was going to transfer on us.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got
I
the
thought
NIL taken
I thought he could be in the portal.
Yeah, for sure.
But we drew him back.
Fellas, it's never about the money.
Oh.
Never. Never.
No.
It's about the association.
Yeah, it's
the kids.
It's
Don't forget the kids.
It's always about the kids.
Always about the kids.
But right out of the gates, we've got to get Gordon's take. So we were talking about the interview I just did with Pablo Mastroianni, the head coach of RSL. And Gordon, as you know, Minnesota they employ a tactic where they put 11 behind the ball and park the buses, they say. Mm-hmm. Tactically, how does RSL break down that style of defense?
Attack. Okay. Press forward.
Ooh.
Because you gotta, if they're parking the bus, you know what? I hate it when teams do that.
Yeah.
You gotta force them out of that, and the best way to do that is with numbers.
Spence, may I follow up?
Please do.
I'm curious. So, with parking the bus, Gordo, how do you go about maybe blowing out 1 or 2 tires of that bus?
Well, you don't want to do that because you want to move the bus.
The entire bus.
Yeah, the entire bus.
So you want to move the entire bus,
Yeah.
not flatten it.
No.
You want to get it out.
Yeah, just move it. And movement, well, you know this from all the sports that you've covered through the years. And Spence, you played a lot of sports. Yeah, movement. Movement is really important. Good form and movement. If RSL does that, I think they'll be able to overcome that.
Last one here, because you're a historian of sorts. Which manager, historically speaking, has been most successful at attacking this type of defense?
Oh man, that's a tough one because I think it might be Carl Fisher.
Carl Fisher. It always goes back. He must have been quite the savant because it always lands on Carl Fisher.
Yeah,
I don't know who he is.
I will research that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I want to research
Do
Carl.
that for me, will you?
All right, moving on.
Okay.
Craig, unfortunately, we have to start with just such a sad situation. Taylor Hendricks comes back, and you're like, the dude looks different. His body was bigger and stronger. For the first couple of games, he had great individual isolation defensive moments on Ja, on Luka. And I was telling you the other night, there was 4 different. There was football, there was World Series. So I'm flipping back and forth. I get 10 texts say the same thing. Did you see what just happened to Taylor? Switch back, do one watch. I'm not a replay when you see a leg go the other way guy. You were courtside. What was it like in the moment, and what have you heard since?
Well, I just, my gut dropped because in my career I've seen so many of these leg and knee injuries, and I have a tough time, and the truck does too, by the way.
Shout out to Trav.
Yeah, whether it's network and what we do locally here, it is a tough replay. Sometimes we'll look back at it during the commercial break because ultimately they take you to break soon after because the medical teams come out. They did a great job getting there quickly. Hats off to Dallas. They were there quickly. But what's weird, Gordo, is I just had this weird tunnel, look at it. It was like, okay, it wasn't the full floor. It was almost like, there were players and fans, but there was just enough of a crack for me to just kind of go, oh man. And that was my gut inside was, oh man. Then I don't know even what I said, but the after effects of Will's reaction spoke volumes. And then I thought the most important part, to show you what the team concept is Keontae's reaction. You see a young man's eyes flooded with tears, and then to hold back I think just to absolutely cry out loud was for him to chew on that towel for a minute or 2 or more. And then I found later that those two were close. Those two had worked during the offseason to really prepare for the jump, and they both wanted to be guys in their second years to, as they say, pop. And it's just tough to see the what they hope would be the future core of this team. One of them has to take a step back, and I don't know when the surgery, if it has happened. I was told on Monday that the process was still, just the evaluation was still going on. They made that public with Will. So they'll probably be quiet just to protect his privacy, and I understand that. But, you just have to hope him the best. It's good to be young and 20. It's a difficult one to come back from. There's multiple injuries that we can all remember, right? Seeing guys who do come back and then some who don't, but you have to have the mindset, man. It's a mental game right now, and I wish him well. He had, and Spence, to your point, he had put on weight, muscle, and he was defending well, and he's actually starting to get more confident with his three-point shot, with a little bit more spreading of the floor. So it's really rough for the Jazz, but also tougher for Taylor Hendricks.
Gordon, if I could spin this in a way that eventually might be positive, I can remember, like Blake Griffin, rookie year, it's a different injury, but he had to sit his entire rookie year.
Yep.
And that gave Blake an extra year to develop. And what that ended up doing is putting Blake kind of in the beginning of his prime when they had Chris Paul there and DeAndre Jordan, and it was Lob City, and they were really good. They didn't win a trophy, but they were a playoff team. They were really good. And if you look at, let me just say this, the Jazz are losing, and I'm here for it. All right, that's just me. As you know, we've talked about it. So if this is the deal, if it's going to be rough all year, and they, knock on wood, get some lottery luck, and if you've been watching the early returns of Duke basketball, you can see Cooper Flagg up close. I'm salivating thinking about the potential. So it gives Taylor, first of all, lucky that he's 20 because he's young. He'll recover. The Jazz medical team is great. And if you play the tape forward, maybe it gives Taylor some extra time to develop and these younger players to grow, and they can gel a little bit more together. I'm trying to be positive, but it has happened before. It actually did happen in Philly with Ben Simmons too, but something happened with him, and he just has been the same player. So if the timeline works out, it might ultimately at the end, if we play it forward, be a positive.
I guess as long as the mental stuff comes back together, I've talked to athletes before, and they're hesitant to ever admit about the mental side of overcoming a physical problem. And if he can do that, then you're right. I agree with you 100%. Never as good as actually having an opportunity to play, but it's not like it's useless. It's not like it's a waste. But, I mean, I've talked to trainers before, the first guys, the doctors on the scene of something like that. And these guys have had injuries before and whatnot. But even then, the trainers told me that they count on their bodies as this is their vehicle. Mm-hmm. We all do, right? We're all human. But these guys use their bodies in their work in a way that is, they depend on it. And so when something like that happens, it's shocking to anyone, but to an athlete who's depended on that leg his whole career, this is kind of a weird thing for him to go through. One question I have for you, Bowler, though, is you talked about decisions about showing the replay. Who makes that decision ultimately?
You have to trust producer-director where they have a millisecond or two to decide, the gruesomeness of the injury, and also I think society has changed a lot from the days of Theismann on Monday Night Football when you remember the matchstick, his leg snapped in half, and how many times can you replay that? It's really up to, I think, the personalities of the guys I work with, both at CBS, Fox, and ESPN, and with the guys with the Jazz. They have a better view of it than I do, and I have to trust them that that's not what we want to see right now, especially when the ankle is pulled to the right about 4 inches, and he's got a tibial break as well, and then the look in his eyes. I mean, I saw all of that in a flash, and some people want to replay that stuff and see it. I get it, but I think they're trying to also protect the interests of the player.
What would you do, Spence, if you were the producer?
Go to break. I mean, look.
That's what we did.
Yeah, you did, and I thought it was the right call. I don't know if it was my guy Trav or what have you, but in this day and age, if you want to go find that, you can in 5 minutes. I mean, I had 3 texts with the video.
Yeah.
Within 2 minutes of that happening.
Multiple angles that were shown on what is now X and any social media outlet. You could get your full taste of it if you wanted to hit rewind and play, rewind and play.
Yeah, if you want to be a masochist on your time, go ahead. But for the broadcast and for the kid, let's go to break.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot to do with it, is to protect the moment for him, even though fans are intrigued to say, really, what happened to him? When I saw it again, his body weight really fell back on the right side of his leg, and I think that, a little stumble with his left toe, shoe, and then boom. It happens so quickly in any sport injury. It's almost like you're dumbfounded. And, getting back to what you were saying, Gordo, I think with this, from my experience, is that he won't be left alone. He'll have a trainer working with him, but there's a loneliness that sets in because you're so used all your life to be a part of a team concept and to be a part of the group, the huddle, that starting 5 or the 11 in football. And you have to be mentally tough. Whoever's working with you has to be special because they have to push you beyond your own mind's limits. Mm-hmm. And I think for him, being 20, he'll learn a lot about himself in this process, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, this is going to be a mental war about how far can I go, how far can I push myself. And the guys that work with him, we won't see much of them in the public eye, but they may be the couple of most important people in his life over the next 12 to 14 months.
You have to develop a trust.
You do.
Push me, don't push me too hard. Push me, and then help me overcome any kind of lingering fear.
Yeah. But when you're alone, that's where it can collapse on you, whether it's dark places or you doubt yourself. Man.
Why me?
Oh, my gosh.
Get into that mindset.
The loneliness sets in because, you know what, the guys are out playing.
Yeah. Right.
And all you can do is maybe watch, and you'll maybe hit a game or two, or you're rehabbing. But, the teammates will be important, too, to stay in contact with Taylor. Because, again, being a young club, they're all trying to grow together and build this championship, hopeful, this drive to a title. And now Taylor, one of the bigger pieces, is out. And, man, you just don't want to go dark places. You've got to stay positive, and a lot of people around you will help that.
Go ahead.
I've been told this, and I don't know. I'm trying to think of my own experience, but people who go through some sort of trauma like that, many of them have told me that when it's the most painful moment is when they wake up.
Yeah.
When in the morning, it could be 2 weeks later. First thing, they wake up and they relive it all over again because they're used to getting up and jumping around and doing what they do, and there it is.
There it is.
The injury is there, and they have to overcome it.
You may have a nice sleep and no telling what the dream state is, and then when you look at it, you go, I'm back, and here I've got to go back and work again and work harder than most.
Last thing on this, because I want to do some college football in our second segment, and then there are plenty of other Jazz things to get to. But do you know anything about Taylor's family? I mean, will they be here? Because he's a young kid.
Yeah.
I don't believe he's married. I know his family is not local. And what you said is so spot on. And in the moments, the trainers aren't there. Hard for me to picture him just being alone at that age.
I would hope.
Yeah.
I can't say for sure who has surrounded him, but I have a feeling family has come calling, and that's a good thing because that takes care of some of that, quote, darkness when – everyone else has gone away on a road trip like the Jazz will starting tomorrow, and you can think about him, but, he's not playing. He's either recovering from surgery, going into surgery, and then the long process of the rehab. Mm-hmm. Man, he's got a tough task ahead, and you hope he's driven, and you hope that people that work with him will drive him even to another level that he may not even know he has.
Yeah, if there's any chance I doubt Taylor listens to Sports Talk Radio, but if you're listening, buddy, we're all behind you. All right, I want to get something from both of you on Keontae, and I've been talking about this all week because I don't usually get too concerned about make or miss with rookies and young players and summer league and stuff. But at this point, his career at Baylor, he played in 33 games in college. He shot 37% from the floor and 33% from three. Year one, Utah, 39% from the floor, 33% from three. It's only 4 games, but this year so far, his splits are even worse. At this point, Keontae is 26% from the floor and 22% from three. So we just simply have a basketball player for about 2.5 years has shown the inability to simply make shots. So you have a front row seat, and I want to get this from both of you. Are you reaching a level where you're a little concerned, or you just see a young kid trying to learn?
Combination. I think what's happened to Keontae is going from a 2 to a 1 to run the show, and I think the immense pressure on him is real. Look, this is this is the NBA.
And he did have 11 assists the other night.
Yes, and he's trying to do things without. He's trying to cut back on turnovers as well, making better. I'd rather see him concentrate on getting his teammates involved than being so focused on trying to be, walking the ball down or making the three or, look, it's still, I think what Will would say is it's early, but also you've got to continue to get your teammates involved and take the best shot. I think the Jazz in these first 4 games, I would say from my chair, and Big T and I talked about it at a shoot-around this morning, the shots look good. There's open space. It's just a matter of the simpleton fact of can you make it and will you make it, or when does that come? I sense still, this pressure of youth, expectations, quick growth. They want to win. They want to prove people wrong. They don't talk about lottery. They go out and know their careers are on the line, and they want to develop. That is what I hear echoing through the Jazz. And on the flights and in shoot-arounds on the road, when you get to talk to these guys even more so. I mean, they're a positive group, and they've added a couple of vets to help them with their mindset. But Gordon, numbers don't lie. I think I think after 15 games for me, maybe 20 is a stretch. But if this continues, then yeah, you may have an issue. There's a lot of guys who say when you're 18 and 19 coming out of college, you have to learn how to shoot. I always thought that was just so ridiculous to point out. But in reality, the old 4-year guys had been through the wars, but no more. It's like you grow up and develop while you're an NBA player, and that wasn't the case during the days of Jerry Sloan.
I had a long conversation with Jeff Hornacek about shooting, and he said –
The right guy to ask.
Yeah, I figured. And he said you go through these slumps. And you got to stay positive, and you can't stop shooting. You got to play your game. But, Spence, the numbers you just gave out, that's more than a slump.
He's never made shots. He just hasn't yet as a player.
And
he had the one rookie record of 10 threes, you remember, last year. Mm-hmm. And that was impressive. It may have been against Dallas or San Antonio. It was one of the 2 teams on the road. But it comes in spurts. We're talking about more consistency.
Right.
Yeah.
And everybody thought after last year that there would be improvement this year. And so to see him going in the other direction at this point, it's early yet, but he's probably pressing a little bit,
Yeah. I think a lot.
And the Jazz as a whole. I mean, I wanted to ask you guys this because it's always fun to talk with you. But when you look how many points the Jazz are giving up a game, how much does that affect their offense?
So they were last in the league last year. They're not last, but they're 23rd in both points allowed and efficiency.
Mm-hmm. They're like giving up, almost 120 points a game?
Yeah. I mean, they're one of the worst teams in the league defensively this year, but at least they're not the worst.
And so, Spence, when you were playing, what does that do at the other end? Do you feel like, oh, man, we just gave up a basket here or 3 or something. Now we got to make it up, and then you start pressing and you get out of sorts.
Yeah, and I think it puts a lot of pressure on a team, Craig, that just doesn't have a ton of offensive firepower right now. And look, teams are selling out to stop Lowry because, of course, and Lowry, he's going to have to adjust to other teams running 2 at him, because he's kind of all they have. And even though Will often talks about this is not a one-man show and Lowry's not an isolation guy, I think Lowry's inability to make shots consistently against defensive pressure is spilling over. And then he left with a back issue. Yeah. I don't know if you have an update for us there.
In and out of shoot-around today. We'll see. I think it's a game-time decision. Yeah. Nothing officially. Yeah. I haven't checked my phone in the last half hour. But I think, too, he is the centerpiece, and everyone comes and attacks. They come in and scrape him. He turns to face the basket or make a roll left or right. It seems like, again, there's a third defender who has leaked by and tried to swipe the ball out of his hands and cause disruption. There's a lot of short shot clocks right now for the Jazz. Keontae's forced some up. Lowry has as well. And again, I sense panic. And Gordon, to your question, I think what I would say is that when you have turnovers and you watch teams run out 12-2 runs, then you think that immediately that you have to answer that. And so you force shots, and then that ball jumps in no man's land, that your opponent jumps and runs, and all of a sudden in transition, which the Jazz are still trying to find a way to be a good transition defensive team, then you start to get smoked, and the heads start to to tilt, and you got yourself a tough ball game.
Well, since I'm the optimist in the room,
Yeah,
and
this is true.
I always try to look at the.
I
the
come here
sunny
only
side.
for one reason, to be motivated.
Be uplifted.
I
By
try to.
Yeah.
But Butler, even though it makes your job more difficult night after night after night, if this continues the way it has, I agree with you, Spence. I mean, that's the good news.
Yeah.
So for fans, and fans want the team to win. I get that, but I would say look for improvement. Look for individual and collective improvement, because that's all you really got. And if your team loses, then I mean, you don't want to see that, but you kind of do.
Well, if you understand the landscape, because look, I don't think anybody down there is under any premonition that this is a piece away from being a contending team. It's going to be a long game. It really is. And we know the deal this year. It's kind of the same as last year. If the pick is outside of the top 10, it goes to OKC in the favors deal. Now, look, I chuckle because at some point that pick has to convey, right? But just not this year with the draft class that's coming in. I mean, people that scout full-time, it's not just Cooper Flagg. There are 5 or 6 names they'll give you. And if you can add a really valuable piece that is a legitimate cornerstone at some point, because they only have one, and it's Lowry, who on a championship team is probably a 2 or maybe even a 3. I mean, on Boston, he might be the third or fourth best player. But that's what you got right now in marketing, and then a bunch of young players. And we'll end on this. It does seem like the development will continue because for one game, Cody steps into the starting lineup. I thought maybe you go with John
Filipowski.
And he looked good.
He looked good. He had 12 points. He's a stretch. He could probably play 5. He wants to probably more likely be a 4, like what marketing can do. Stretch the floor, hit the threes, runs the floor well. Kessler's had a pretty good start thus far, at least in defensive minds. He's had a couple of offensive games, but he can rebound the hell out of the ball. So, you know what, Gordon, you're right. I think that fans who come to games, and it's been incredible in the first 3 home games, this will be 4 of 5 to start the season, is that they're still there. They are still engaged, which I applaud. But I think it's the little things. If you're really a basketball aficionado, each guy you pick, whoever you want to follow, whether it's Cody, whether it's Keontae, whether it's Flip, whomever it may be, try to look and find the development, because it's going to come in small increments, but then one night it's going to start to build. And that's what Justin Zanuck and Danny are hoping for. Look, this is a new breed of basketball. It's youth. It's young. My only fear is you develop them, and then are you able to retain them, right?
One piece.
Well, before you retain them, Bowler, you have to – if you're trying – everyone always talks about winning culture, right? You got to develop the winning culture and hold on to it. Can you keep that when you're losing?
It's one of the biggest challenges, and that's where Will Hardy, I think, makes – such a huge impact with his team. He is uber positive, at least in front of the media, and when I'm watching on the floor, he understands the big picture. His job is the developmental part, and he's going to get, his kicks whenever he sees what the final outcome will be. And for the Jazz to pick up the 5th year of his deal, he knows he's got security for that point. And, in a league that wants to win now, the Jazz are on the same page, knowing that it's a youth movement. They've been more open about it now, which I think is good, like what Witt finally said, too, about, Isaac Wilson, even though he got the bench, got the hook the other night. I think the fans have to kind of understand what's going on, and the guessing game quits, because then you settle in and say, okay, let's watch together and see where this goes.
Journey of 1,000 miles. Starts with one step, right? All right, we'll do some college football coming up next. Craig Bowler, Jack Gordon Monson, live in studio right here on ESPN 700. Jazz in action tonight, taking on Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs. So we get a little Walker Kessler Wembanyama action. Gordon Monson and Craig Bowler-Jack are live in studio. All right, next week is a big week. I've always said it's like the preeminent date on our sporting calendar, unless the Jazz are in the finals or we have the Olympics or whatever. It's Utah and it's BYU football.
Yeah.
And so let's get into it. I've been talking about this all week because you guys certainly know better than I do, but I know enough to know that when I was growing up, it was Lavelle, and BYU kicked Utah's head in every year, and it took like an Eddie Johnson miracle, Scott Mitchell miracle at one point to get a win from time to time. Ronnie Mack rolls in. He kind of evens the playing field. Then Kyle takes over. Utah football goes to the Pac-12. Obviously, there's the urban pit stop that we had. BYU football goes independent. There's all this ambiguity about their future. Utah, for the most part, has kicked their heads in now for a generation, 14-4, including 9 straight. And for a number of years, BYU fans have heard Ute fans from their ivory tower call you the little brother. Mm-hmm. Now BYU's rolling. They're 8-0. Utah is reeling at 4-4. And Gordon, we'll start with you on this one. I think those boys are coming up here for blood next Saturday.
I think they will, and they seem to be capable of extracting that blood. But in this rivalry situation, you never know. I look at it like this. Okay, if Utah plays against BYU at its lower level, it's going to get smoked. But if it plays its best and BYU plays at its lower level, now you got a ball game, and now you got a situation where emotion comes into play, maybe a turnover, a fumble, a pick, and then next thing you know, hey, this thing could be what nobody expected. And we've seen enough surprises in college football this year to not be overly shocked if that were to happen. Is BYU the better team? They certainly look to be the better team, and there is a collectiveness in Provo right now that is rare. I haven't seen it a whole lot down there, guys, in the last decade or so.
Swagger.
It's a swagger, but it's kind of a feeling of, hey, this is for real. This is my brother over here, and I'm playing for him too, not just for myself. And so when you get that going, and Kalani's feeding off that right now.
Yeah.
You listen in to their huddles and what they say, and it's all about, man, we got this. We're going to do this. And that's a positive vibe, and they're pretty damn good, too.
Yeah, Craig, you've called a lot of rivalry games locally and nationally. Things can get weird.
Oh, they get weird.
There's no doubt. But at this point, BYU's a slight favorite in Vegas. It feels like most of the momentum is down south.
Yeah, I would think, I always laugh when no one would ever respond to them as BYU, as that team. It's just that team down south.
That was urban.
Yeah. Never would call them, the BYU Cougars.
That's because when he was at Ohio State, Michigan was the team up north.
Up north, yeah. I think this game right now on paper and the way the mental side of this, because, again, we're talking mental today, right, for some reason, Taylor, and his response to his injury. This goes the same way for my book. I mean, where is Utah? They've already been beaten twice at Rice-Eccles Stadium, right? And I always think in rivalry games that the home field is where it's at. That's the juice, Where are the fans, and are they going to bring juice that can help elevate any home team in a rivalry game like that? I'm not sure if I'm feeling that around town right now. I just drove in, and here comes a pickup truck with Utah sucks, BYU rolls, rules on those big flag stuff on the back of a Ford F-150, whatever it was. I thought, wow, man, it's starting.
Breakaway Republic.
Yeah, it's starting. But, Spence, I tell you, I love rivalry games because you just said it. There is still the unpredictability of the emotion of the moment because these guys have grown up here some. They played against each other in some ways. Some don't care because they don't know Utah, or they're from the islands, or they're from, back east. So, they call it the Holy War, the rivalry, red and blue. I just think, let's go play good football. But Utah's not in a good mindset right now. And who is the quarterback on this incredible rivalry day for the University of Utah?
Yeah, no one knows, Gordon, because we're back to now it's Brandon Rose and Isaac Wilson splitting the reps with the ones, which I never think is a good thing leading up to next Saturday. Although Kyle did say that Isaac has been hurt. Maybe there's something there because there were moments early on, Baylor, Utah State, Oklahoma State, and Stillwater, and even though OK State sucks, and we know that now, Isaac hasn't looked the same since then. So maybe he's been dinged up in a way we didn't know.
So it gets back to the question that Kyle talked about with Cam Rising. Is Isaac Wilson at 85% better than Rose at 100%?
Yeah.
And you get into this guessing game. And, of course, Kyle loves living in that space because he thinks it gives him such an advantage against the opponent. But it's obvious that Kyle thinks that Isaac Wilson is the better quarterback. Mm-hmm. So if he's able to go and he's able to overcome whatever problem he has, then he would be the guy.
Yeah.
But the mystery is he at 85? Is he at 80? Is he at 75? Or is he 95? We don't really know. And that adding to everything else that the Utes have been facing. I mean, when you drop 4 straight, Utah football's not used to that.
No, not at all.
And so how do you react? They are used to overcoming adversity. We've seen that in past seasons where they really came back strong. But that adversity never translated into 4 straight losses.
Yeah, and I think this year, to Craig's point, because I've heard from 5 different people that have sold their tickets, that are season ticket holders up there, like, I don't want to be in the stadium because I'm afraid BYU is going to thump us. There's like this collective weight around Ute football and the fan base right now, and it's not just losing 4 straight. And I've said this all week. I get a lot of things wrong. I don't think I've ever been as wrong as I've been about a team as I was about Utah football.
I'm with you, brother.
Yeah.
But,
So
we
it's gotta be the expectations,
we
right?
thought Cam was going to be healthy.
Sure.
Right, yeah.
Look, everyone in this state was pounding their chest, Utah fans, in the middle of August, thinking that this thing was going to be potentially a playoff game at Rice-Eccles Stadium, and you could maybe smell a little bit more than that, right?
Yeah.
With the way the new playoff system is. And no one talked about BYU. Oh, man, the poor guys down south.
Maybe they get to a
man.
bowl. How
Maybe,
cute. Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
4
yeah.
wins.
Yeah.
You know, if they're lucky, they could maybe get the Mickey Mouse Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was kind of the mentality.
Yeah, by everybody.
And they have just run the table. I said this a week or 2 ago. They're still the most opportunistic football team, I think, in college football. Balls bounce their way. They make hits. They're more physical, they're faster, and more athletic than I think most people thought.
For sure. Because
Honestly.
they didn't make any additions in the transfer portal. No, they made some, but not many. I mean,
No.
they relied on growth from within.
I'm impressed with speed, physicality, and the athleticism that Kalani has right now. Now, is that because they're all as one? You know, teams get on rolls because of – you can't explain it, but, man, inside that huddle, there are eyeballs looking around going, we got this, and we're going to do it.
Well,
And it's real. That's a real deal in sport.
Look at the receiving core. Look at that. That is a really talented group.
Deanna Hill can't even get a target because he's got 4 dudes in front of him.
And they got other guys coming. It's just I tell you, it gets back to this, and people think it's hocus pocus and all that. No, it's real. When you have a feeling on your team that you can win, that you deserve to win, watch what the coaches say to the BYU players before every game. What do they say? They say, you've worked your off and you deserve to win this game. And they believe it. And they did put the work in. I mean, how else? That's undeniable.
Spence, I think here's another key to this rivalry game. Look, Utah's defense can only do so much. And they have played down after down after down and trying to put the stops on teams when Utah's offense was just sputtering and Wilson was trying to understand who he was when Cam went down. They cannot just save this team. There has to be something, and Andy's gone now. So what is the new? Is there going to be a new offensive scheme that works better for Wilson? And when this game is played, not a lot of time to implement it. But I'm just saying, so many things have changed, and the defense can't stay on the field all night.
And they've been injured. I mean, and I'm not going to make excuses for the Utah defense, but they've had those defensive linemen who have been absent certain times. So will they all be able to come back and play against BYU?
Well, a bye week helps. You know, you can get nicks, injuries heal up, especially when you're young. But still, I wonder what their mental state is knowing that Cam, who really I think had more leadership and love amongst the 22 and beyond, and the disappointment of his injury, and then the inability of the offense to move without him put a lot of pressure on the defense.
So the defensive numbers are still pretty good. The overall defensive numbers for Utah football, they're about top 3 to 5 in rushing, total, scoring, red zone. They're number 1 first and third down. They're last in the conference at fumbles recovered. They're second to last in the conference at fumbles forced. They're 11th in sacks. So, like, the things that they typically do well are the things they're not doing this year at all. And Kyle always talks about winning the turnover battle, pressuring the quarterback.
Putting the offense in a better position.
Right.
With the defensive, with the fumble recoveries,
Yeah.
the forced fumbles, or a very important INT.
But if they don't get to Jake has shown everybody if he has time, he's going to run, which he does well, or he's going to find one of his 5 like awesome wideouts. That to me is kind of where the game lies. Can Utah get to Jake? Can they, kind of flip the script with their inability to get to quarterback so far?
And when you think of Utah football's identity, the word that comes to mind is physicality, right? And so when you're not forcing fumbles, where do fumbles come from? Every once in a while, you'll see someone lose the handle and drop it, but oftentimes they get hit and they get hard and the ball pops loose.
Or they come in and make the extra grab. They swarm the runner or the receiver, and they are grabbing and pulling at the old pigskin. And that's what Utah's been known to do, too. Special teams really hasn't made a pop, which has also been kind of a factor for Witt during his time up at the U. So, yeah, it's been a rough year, one that nobody expected.
Right.
But does it change? Does it change against BYU?
I'll say it. I'll say it. I'll say it twice now because I believe it. If BYU comes in and plays sloppy football, they can be beat. And if Utah comes in and plays at the higher level of what it's capable of doing, let's say it the way it is. This team is underperformed. Would you agree? Would you?
Utah?
Yes.
Oh,
I mean,
massively.
I'm not talking
Massively.
just schematically. I'm talking they have too much talent to lose 4 straight games.
Yeah.
And I don't care if Cam Rising is playing or not. This team has not risen to the occasion. And that's what we're used to seeing out of Utah football.
But I'm
so can they rise on this next Saturday? Well, and by the way, the game's at 8:15.
I was waiting for it. I got it.
Yeah.
I was waiting for Gordon to get upset, so I assume you will not be there.
Well, no, I don't know.
You can bring a blanket.
I'm not saying so much that because
Bowl of soup.
Bowl of soup.
Deadline doesn't matter
Hot chocolate.
anymore.
Got a thermos.
But it just seems like look, if Utah comes prepared and can shed this whole sort of a shadow that it's carrying with itself, is it capable of beating BYU? Only if BYU betrays itself.
So about the team concept you were saying with Brigham Young, listen to this, man. 8 different players have sacks. 11 different players have an interception. 17 different players have scored a touchdown.
That's fascinating.
That's mind-blowing.
It is 17 different players with a touchdown.
They played like 7 running backs for a while, right? But, I mean, 8 different players with a sack is pretty crazy. 11 with a pick is nuts. But 17 different players scoring touchdowns. I mean, they're playing complementary football. They're deep, top to bottom, and I'm really happy for that coaching staff because they were all up here for a while.
Well, obviously, offensively, they've scored touchdowns. Defensively, they've scored touchdowns a bunch. Special teams, they score touchdowns. Not about covers it. I don't think anybody on the bench is going to score a touchdown. If that happens,
don't think that's allowed?
No, I don't think so.
Unless they come out and trip somebody.
And your point is well made there, Spence, because this is no fluke.
No.
But what's happening down in Provo is no fluke. This team, did it surprise us all? Yeah, and I'm willing to admit that.
Surprised the whole conference.
And I've been willing to admit, like you have, Spence, that I was wrong about the Utes. I'll say that. But I want to give BYU credit because what they have overcome, they've pushed the boulder up the hill. They've turned this thing around. And that boulder was coming downhill. Yeah. And they've turned it around, and you got to give them credit for that. They believe in themselves. They're much more talented than we thought they were. And that gets back to that receiving core. Darius Lassiter is this guy. I mean, this guy is a talent.
He's a real talent.
But then you have Chase Roberts, and you got the other. I mean, there's like you said, Spence. There's 5 or 6 of them.
Spence, I got to go with this idea too. This is the fan idea that I have. You said something that caught my eye or my ear about 5 minutes ago. 3 or 4 fans who are selling their tickets. Mm-hmm. Where do you think those tickets go to?
They go straight to BYU fans online.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
You turn red into blue. You lose your home field advantage if this becomes an epidemic.
Yeah.
And so that's something to watch.
Aren't BYU fans afraid they're going to get beer spilled on them?
There's not. Okay, I've been on this for years.
Sorry.
Okay, so to all the BYU fans.
Didn't mean to interrupt there, Bo.
No.
Real quick, let me.
Maybe
just
they'll
make
have
this,
one.
Let
I don't
me just
know.
make this point one more time. For all the BYU fans that are heading up to Salt Lake, here's some breaking news. There's not beer in that stadium.
Yeah.
They don't sell it. And if you're going to sneak something in, it's not beer.
Yeah.
Okay? So maybe you get a little whiskey poured on it, but I promise you're not getting beer poured.
Look, man, all
but-
there is the tailgates, and there's plenty of that flowing.
Bowler, that point you're making, what happens if BYU comes up to Rice Eccles and gets a 2 or 3 touchdown lead? Does the home field advantage actually become a disadvantage at that point, where your home fans are looking at you like you suck?
Oh, they'll start getting boo birds. They've already been booed up
They
there
have.
a couple times.
They have.
Yeah.
The one game that I went to, and you were there too, Spence, I was like, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, there was an empty shell feeling because of the so much hype. And then the anger, I think, came into play here. Gordo, I mean, you may have written about this, but, fans wanted Cam. And when Cam dressed and still didn't play, there was like scratching their heads like, why not? Well, there's reasons to it. Doctors and, potential NIL agents or whatever you want to call them, they're protecting the health of a player, and it disrupts, fans' love for a team. But everyone wanted Cam so bad to perform this year, and doggone it, got bit again.
So we've got a 4 o'clock. Danny Cannell's at 4, so we've got to stay on clock a little bit, which I'm horrible at. But I wanted to get this from both of you, because if you're Coach Witt, I mean, there's nothing you can do over the final 4 games of the season to show everybody that you are the team that we thought that you were. That's off the table. They're not in the mix for the Big 12 championship. But if you can have one moment against BYU, you are remembered in this community forever, right? So if you're Kyle, what's your message to your players leading up to this game? Because if you do spoil their perfect season, if you do thump them a little bit in a way nobody's expecting, none of us around here are going to say, oh, yes, we thought they had that in them, because they've already shown that they fell short of expectations. But if they're able to do that, what's the conversation around these players and this team?
Well, Kyle Whittingham, newsflash, first of all, hates playing BYU. Doesn't like this game. But if he's going to play it, believe me, he's going to pour everything he has into those Utes coming out and kicking the Cougars' butt. And everyone knows Kyle played at BYU, but there's enough bad blood there, and not with Kalani, because those guys.
All those guys are tight, right?
But Kyle wants to beat this team in the worst way. So I'll say it this way: we will see the best Utah has against BYU, more than any other opponent left on the schedule. If they are capable of hanging in there with BYU, then we'll see that truth. But if they, I guess what I'm saying is this will be their best effort for the rest of the season. That Saturday night. If they don't, they can't.
What do you think, Craig?
That's a great point. Real quick, I think Witt will make this their bowl game and try to preach that throughout the week. I think they have to strike first. You cannot afford turnovers, because opportunistic BYU will be right there to say hello and make you pay. If you want to sell Isaac Wilson to the fans for next year, it's that one moment where he maybe lofts a nice 32-yard touchdown pass over the middle, and Keefe runs it in for 6, and that's it. That would be the Eddie Johnson type moment, or Scotty Mitchell doing his work. That's what would be, in a sense of we just derailed BYU season, and we just propelled ourselves on a positive note for next year. That's what I think they will try to accomplish on that game.
And it would give the fans something to at least hold on to, because right now this is a fan base that is not feeling the love. Great to see you guys. We'll do it again next week. Rivalry week will be next week. We'll see you then, all right?
All right.
No, what's that smirk? He has a smirk.
Happy. Hey, look, I know how you are at Halloween. Don't scare the kids.
That's not possible.
Should I give out ice cream tonight or not?
Ice cream?
It melts. We've been over this.
But see, that's what he likes. Melt. Hey, kid, here.
Full-size candy bars. Up where you're at in the Cove, people expect the full-size candy bars and maybe a 20 wrapped around it.
Yeah.
Man, all of a sudden I'm feeling all this pressure like I'm going up against BYU next week or something.
I think a 20 around a big Baby Ruth or a Butterfinger.
Yeah, step
and say,
up
kid,
for once.
good to see you.
Gosh.
Come back and see me again.
Okay,
Don't say that.
one last question. One last question. Is one full size the equal of two
No,
fun size?
not where you live.
No.
People are expecting
No,
full size up in
no.
the Cove. You know it.
I'll tell this story real quick because
All
I
right.
know you want to stay on
You're
schedule.
good. You're good.
Talk to Dennis Lindsay. Remember Dennis?
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
He bought a house on a street I almost bought a house on.
Oh, here we go.
And
Jeez. Was Gobert in the backyard too?
Build him a guest house is what he
Do
did.
yourself any favor.
Gordo says, Rudy, you can live over here right behind me.
no, there was a house on this street, and I went to the neighbor's house, knocked on the door,
Huntsman.
and I said, and this woman answered the door, who was,
All right.
and Lisa suddenly didn't want that house anymore. But we joke about that. But
sure you
later, Dennis Lindsay moved in on that. He moved like right across the street from the house I almost bought, and he said that on Halloween they gave out like 1,200 candy bars.
Oof.
Are you prepared? Is Lisa
Yeah. Are you
prepared for that?
Well, I'm sure Lisa is.
You're not
No,
going to throw in a lifesaver, are you?
Yeah.
Now, this is what happens. At a certain time, when that bag gets empty, then the lights go out and the doors are locked.
Oh man, people expect more from you, Gordon.
And the windows get soaked.
Looks
Well,
like.
I better go get some full size. I'm not
Yeah.
sure we have them.
I was going to say you need to get to the store. Great to see you guys. We'll
All
see you
right.
next week. All right.
Take care.
Greg Bolerjack, hear him on the call tonight as Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs are in town. Let me tell you about Gordon Monson's favorite distillery. It's Clearwater Distilling, the only distillery in Utah County open on Sundays. Great spirits. They've got a tasting room. They've got their limited release Wednesday whiskey out right now. Check out the Scandalous. It's a grown-up version of the cinnamon whiskey. They're a VIP tailgate spirits provider. So check out our tailgate, and then you can schedule a tasting at their facility. Try the Scandalous, try the Josephine, or the Renee. You can buy their spirits in state liquor stores online or take a trip to their distillery. Check out more information at clearwaterdistilling.com. They're located at 564 West, 700 South in Pleasant Grove. Danny Canella's next right here on ESPN 700. BYU. Second time this year that it's happened, but they play each other next Saturday. So a lot of exciting college football here locally and certainly nationally. Always a pleasure to welcome in my next guest, Danny Cannell, brought to you by Bet Online. Check betonline.ag for updated college football playoff, conference, Heisman, and Week 10 lines. DK, happy Thursday, brother. How we doing?
Happy Thursday, Spence. I don't know if you caught the intro, my walk-up song, if you will. That was a little Doors by request. This is the end. The end, my only friend, the end. And I don't know if you saw the movie The Doors with about the story of with Val Kilmer played Jim Morrison. That's a song that's like for the teams out there. Now, my team, my Florida State Seminoles, are like the prime example for that one. When you're just lost in the desert and you're stumbling around, tripping on some sort of acid, and they're searching for the meaning of life and you just want it to be over. Like, that's what I feel like is for my fan base. And maybe Utah could relate after the expectations they came in, and I thought they would too. I think they're searching for answers all over the place. You know, the season's come off. It's the end for Cam Rising, I think, there with the injury that ended his season yet again. So it's just like that. We're kind of commiserating together. And so I felt like The End by The Doors was the perfect song to just stumble around, just lost and dumbfounded with the way the season has unfolded.
That is very well said. And just so you know, I was hoping my producer was going to play the DK in NY rap when you came on, but I'm glad you chose your walk-up song. And you articulated where we're at perfectly. I guess I'll just follow up. I've been saying all week, Danny, and I get a lot wrong. I mean, you know the deal in this business. You do the best you can to prepare and make educated guesses. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. I don't think I've ever been as wrong as I've been this year about this Utah football team. How stunned are you that we're sitting here with a 4-4 team with no shot to win the Big 12?
Oh, I'm shocked for sure. And I was like you. I thought that, because I made every single, conference champion I picked before the season. And a lot of them I was waffling on, like, oh, do I pick Clemson or Miami in the ACC? Do I pick Ohio State or Oregon in the Big 10? But the Big 12, I said I felt most confident, without hesitation, it's going to be Utah. Now, I would have said also, now I didn't think this, Cam Rising is back. What a difference he makes for that team. And if you would have told me that once again he would have had injuries and missed most of the season, then I clearly would have changed my pick because that is that type of loss for that program. So that clearly, has kind of derailed the season for the Utes. But once again, 4-4 is pretty surprising. And the fact that they didn't have, maybe a better supporting cast for Isaac Wilson, and he's still kind of feeling his way around college football as a young starter, that's probably, it's still a little bit surprising they're not at least like 6-2. It's a surprising to see them with this record, even without Cam Rising. And it's been, I'm sure, Utah fans are as bummed as any and surprised that the season has kind of unfolded the way it has.
One more Utah question. Cam, he's having surgery this week, Danny, and he does have I'm laughing as I say this. It's not funny that he's hurt, but he does have an 8th year of college eligibility. Do you believe there are a lot of people around here that believe that this should just be like a good marriage that kind of, was drawn out. You hug each other. You say, thanks for the memories. You walk, you kind of walk away from each other. But what do you make of the potential of Cameron coming back maybe for one more year?
I must be honest with you. I kind of side with the fans and say, you know what? We'll wish you the best of luck. Good luck somewhere else. Go get some NIL money somewhere else. But we've given you opportunity after opportunity, and we can't wait for the future of our program for another season, because think of what it does to the recruiting process, right? You're either through the portal or the high school ranks. Like, how are you going to be able to get, another quality quarterback to come in there, knowing that if Cam Rising's coming back, you probably have zero chance to play? And we're talking about a quarterback who's missed the majority of the last 2 seasons. There's no guarantee that if he does come back, if he's going to be healthy enough to, to keep to be healthy to start for 12 games of a college football season. So my hunch tells me, I have no inside intel. I just almost feel like that's what the Utah coaching staff would kind of want as well. Like in college football, we're going in this direction where we're seeing 7th year, 8th year players. Miami has a tight end down in, for the Hurricanes that's in his 9th year of eligibility. It's getting a little bit ridiculous. And at some point, I think you just got to say it's time. And I feel like that's what both sides will do. I think Cam Rising might want to go try his hand somewhere else, maybe a fresh, change of scenery. But I also think Utah would probably take the same angle, be like, we've really appreciated you putting your body on the line for us, but I think it's best in both interests, both parties' interest if we both go in different directions.
So I think you'll be really good to provide some context here because you referenced Isaac. Isaac is 18 years old. He enrolled in April. You had the opportunity, and as a Nick fan in the 90s, Charlie Ward is my guy. You had the opportunity as a freshman to watch potentially the best quarterback in college football, and their plan was for Isaac to watch Cameron and then potentially take over. How hard is it, as someone who's never done this before at the age of 18, to be tasked with leading a team that was one of the favorites to win the Big 12?
It's so hard, and I say analysts, college football personalities, fan bases. We put so much pressure on young players to come in, produce right away. And it's really ridiculous to think that, a true freshman could come in and contribute and be somebody who can lead your team, to a Big 12 title or a championship game. And you're just going to see a lot of mistakes that are made. That's totally normal. And yet we treat these young players like, oh my gosh, this kid's not going to be as good as we thought. Or, and I know there's a connection with his brother, and his brother's career didn't pan out in the NFL. So there's, here goes another Wilson that's going to be a bust. It's so much pressure, and it's not fair, but it's the very harsh reality of life in, college football today. And, what's interesting is, talking about Cam Rising and would he come back? If he comes back, are you sure that Isaac would come back? Does he want to, now that he's got a little taste of playing and he is developing and he is hopefully getting better and better each week, and he's made some of these freshman mistakes, you might lose him in the portal if some of the other, schools see a flash and say, oh, this kid is pretty talented. He was a pretty sought-after guy. Maybe we can go get him. It might make it harder to keep Isaac Wilson if Cam Rising came back. So there's a lot that goes into it. But it is, man. I was a player who was completely in over my head. I mean, I was making sure I got the snap and went the right way on handoffs to make sure the run was going the right way. And now you talk about quarterbacks who have so much on their plate at the line of scrimmage, running systems that are way more complex, facing defensive coordinators that are going to throw a lot more at you. It's so hard, and yet we have such high expectations. It's really not fair to younger players that are thrust into action.
Is it true? I need a fact check here. Is it true that you were the backup to Charlie Ward, and then the other backup was a guy named John Stark?
So my freshman year, I was a true freshman, and I was the backup. And then my sophomore year, John Stark came in, and he was the third string, but we would swap in and out sometimes, late game situations, because they wanted us both to get experience while we would compete for the job the spring after that sophomore year. So, yeah, he was on the team with us, John Stark. Yeah, for sure.
Was the tight end named Charles Oakley? This is wild to me that we have all these 90 Nick references on one team.
That's right. I forgot. I was wondering where you were going then. I'm like, how the heck does he know John Stark? But yes, if you looked at the roster, that is pretty wild. And the Knicks connection, especially where Charlie ended up and, of course, had a great career. How about this for a Knicks connection? One of my golfing buddies who I golf with almost once a week is Greg Anthony, former UNLV running rep and New York Knick, who's a great guy and a pretty good golfer. Every once in a while, he takes some of my money, which I'm not too happy about.
I know Greg. Please tell him I said hello next time you golf with him. That's awesome.
He's awesome. So yeah, he's a good guy.
So, Danny, the irony where we find ourselves here in state is I thought Utah would have a high-powered offense. I thought they'd have a physical, dominant defense. I thought they'd be dialed in on special teams. I thought the stadium would be going crazy. I thought they'd be in the mix to win the Big 12. Well, all that's happening about 40 miles south as the crow flies. What do you make of this undefeated BYU Cougar team?
It's been awesome. What a great story. And, I love both of the coaches in this matchup. Like Kyle Whittingham, I can't say enough how much I respect him and the job he's done at Utah. And Kalani Sitake at BYU, I would say the same thing. He's one of the more well-liked, well-respected coaches in college football. And what's crazy is how we've seen this role reversal just in the course of the season. Because as you mentioned, Utah was the heavy favorite. BYU, I think their win total was probably 4.5, very low expectations with them coming into the Big 12. And, last year was a little bit bumpy, but no one saw the year that Jake Retzlaff having, and he's playing great football as the quarterback, who's this incredible story, which, is starting to take root across college football, recognizing a Jewish player playing at a Mormon school. It's been a ton of fun. But what I wanted people to know is what a good football team this is. And people can keep doubting them, but they keep proving the the critics wrong. They keep proving the odds makers wrong, like they did last week when it closed and they were an underdog at UCF, and they go out there and pretty much spank them and run them off the field so much that UCF is firing people and, switching play callers. This BYU team has one of the better resumes in the whole country as far as games they've won, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if they're one of the teams at the end that's playing for the Big 12 championship.
Am I seeing on the DK top 10 you have BYU at 4 right now?
Absolutely. If you look at their strength of record. So now the other thing, too, is my top 12, I like to do it the way I think it should be done, where it is not forward-looking. It's not a power ranking. It's not who do you think is going to be there at the end. It's who deserves to be in the top 12 right now. And when you look at BYU's schedule through this part of the season, we're at 7 and 8 games, and we only have one more month of the season left. When you've played and beaten this many teams, to me, it means you're one of the best teams in the country. And I know we get cute with, well, this team has a good loss, and Notre Dame fans are mad at me because their win against A&M was better than any BYU win. And I'm like, well, what about Notre Dame's loss? They lost to Northern Illinois. That's something that BYU hasn't done to anybody. So I want to make sure they get the credit they deserve for winning games on the football field. And if they do, I think they'll finally get respect from the College Football Selection Committee, from other people that have them a little bit lower, and they kind of doubt them and say, well, let's see, because Georgia still looks really good, and Georgia's a team that's a traditional blue blood. Same thing with Alabama with 2 losses. Well, they have 2 good losses. I get so tired of hearing that garbage. Show me a team that learns and finds out ways to win, and I'll put them up there at the top of the rankings where they belong.
So talk to me about the dynamic, Danny, of a rivalry game, which is where we find ourselves here next week with BYU rolling into Salt Lake. I believe last I checked, BYU is still a slight favorite. And you're a guy that played in an era where FSU Miami was like the biggest rivalry you could find, and that was when I grew up learning to love college football. And ultimately for Utah, and you know the deal, if you have the ability to rise up and be great in one moment against your rival, you will be remembered in the community forever, even if you're playing for a team that has not lived up to expectations. And we've seen this game get weird so many times. So Brigham Young rolls up here undefeated, Utah reeling. Any thoughts on what we could see next Saturday?
Totally, Spence, and you nailed it. The one thing I never was in, and I'm very thankful for this, and we had 2 rivals because we had Miami and we had Florida, and they were both in the state, and there was a saying that said the national championship runs through the state of Florida because there was a really good chance one of the 3 schools was going to be playing in the national championship game once the season ended, but they always meant more. And most of the time, it meant our season was either going to be a championship season or it was going to fall short of those expectations. What I had never experienced was what Utah is experiencing now, where really what they're playing for is the role of spoiler, right? And they would love nothing more than to ruin BYU's great storybook season. And the other thing that really adds some fuel to the fire is that a lot of these players, some of them grew up playing against each other, whether it was in high school or 7-on-7 leagues. They're recruited by the same schools. They run in the same circles. And now more than ever, they get to know each other because of social media, because you cross each other's paths and you develop relationships. So it's almost like playing against some of your boys sometimes. But those were some of the fiercest matchups you could have. I played with guys that I played against in high school, and while I loved them and respect them, I hated them and the fact that they represented another school and their colors, and I would do anything I could to ruin their season and knock them out of a championship game. And Utah's in that role now where, yes, the season feels like they're not going to get the expectations. They're not going to reach the goals they probably set at the beginning of the season. Well, the next best thing you can do is salvage a season with the win against a rival like BYU. Playing at home, you know what it means, and you are 1,000% right, Spence, when you say these are the games that fans remember 10, 20, 30 years from now. Like, no one comes up to me and says, oh, I remember the game against Wake when you guys scored 70 points. No, they say, oh, wait, you were in one of the wide right games. And I was like, yep. Or you were in the choke at Doak when you guys came back 31-3. Those are the games that fans remember all the time. They're never going to remember some of those regular season games that just conference games. They remember the rivalry games like this one.
So how many teams, Danny, do you believe still have a legitimate shot to win the Big 12?
Oh, man. I think there's probably 5, right? And they all start to play each other here down the stretch. I mean, it's kind of the way the round robin, works with that style because, you've got BYU, you've got Iowa State, you've got Kansas State. There's 3. And then there's Colorado, right? That's right there. That's up towards the top. Who am I missing? There's
got TCU, Texas Tech, Cincinnati, West Virginia, all 3 and 2.
So maybe it's just 4. Maybe it's just those 4. And I think Colorado's right there on the outside, needs a little bit of help. But I probably lean for the favorites to be BYU and Iowa State. Like those 2 are the 2, that kind of, have impressed me the most, have been able to win this thing and take it down the home stretch. So I think it's probably a 4-team race with Colorado looking on the outside a little bit in. They've been a great story, and Deion has turned that thing around and made them a contender. But yeah, I'd say it's probably a 4-team race.
Is there a way that this conference gets 2 teams in, or does it feel like it's a one bid league?
We have to see what happens. An unfortunate reality, and this is what I can't stand, is that the Big Ten and the SEC are the super conferences. They've got the most money. They've got the biggest brands, and they're probably going to, by default, because of all those factors, get more teams into the college football playoff. So, like, if you put in 2 Big 12 teams, you're probably going to have to take out one of those Big Ten or SEC teams, and probably one of those SEC teams. Like, you've got Bama and LSU playing this weekend. 2 lost teams going toe to toe. I think they both should be out. Like, I think 2 losses, especially when you don't have any real, big wins, like LSU is really lacking the signature win. At least Bama has the Georgia win they can hang their hat on. But I think those 2 losses should put you on the outside, but still people have them up there, in the top 12 vicinity where they could be within striking distance if one of them wins out. And, like, that's what concerns me is they would take a 2-loss SEC team over a 1-loss Big 12 team. And then the ACC, I still think, has 2 teams that are going to get in. And then you've got 3 or 4 from the Big 10. And then you've also got to get the group of 5 team in. So the spots just started getting taken up, and that sucks a lot of air out of. And unfortunately, I think the perception of the Big 12 has to, start to rise, and they have to change it by getting some non-conference wins. And I just don't know if there's been enough signature wins for the conference to get across the board for them to get in 2 teams. But I would love to see it. I just think there's going to be some carnage at the end, and the champion, the Big 12 champ, is probably going to have 1 loss, maybe 2 when it's all said and done. So probably just get 1 in. But there's still a month of football left, and it's been a wacky year. We'll see if they could possibly sneak in, too.
Before I set you loose, I got to kick the tires, not to rub salt in the wound on just exactly what's happened in Tallahassee. I mean, it's been rough up here, but Florida State, and it continues.
All trade just spent.
Yeah, I know, seriously. But at 1-7, we're all shocked. Is this a coaching thing? Is it a personnel thing? Like, how has this gone so poorly?
It has been the hardest, most disappointing season that I can remember, since I played at Florida State. There have been bad seasons. Like, we've lost to FCS programs. We've been a 5-win football team. But the thing that makes it sting the worst is those expectations coming into the season. The fact that I thought they could contend for an ACC championship. The fact that the coaching staff thought they had the players in place to win an ACC championship and make a playoff run. And it's just completely derailed. I think it's a combination of misevaluating talent. DJ Uyunglele just didn't work. And I was skeptical. I didn't think he was the best, quarterback to go get in the portal, but I thought he would at least provide a floor because of how much experience he had. That wasn't the case. The offensive line, they severely misevaluated because they've been atrocious, and they played 7 different starting 5 rotations throughout the season. The defense has been good, and I think the defense has been good enough to win, so I'm not as hard on them. But the offense has just really not been anything like that resembles really an FBS program. It's been that bad. Then you throw in the mix of when players that don't live and die and breathe and eat and sleep next to each other and, are raised in the same program. Like when I went to Florida State, my freshman class, we kind of had a bond with each other. And when we became sophomores and juniors, we developed and we got better together. There's a lot of new faces, and I think that's what we're going to see more often times than we think. When you hit that portal and you go portal heavy, when you hit it, yes, it can be awesome. And you can run the table like Florida State did last year. But when you miss and you start losing games, that foundation can really start to crumble quickly because those guys weren't there to lay the foundation. They're just hired mercenaries. And when that thing starts coming off the rails, I think you start to see players throwing the towel a little bit, and then it can really come off the rails, which clearly happened there in Tallahassee.
What do you want our listeners to know about betonline.ag, Danny?
It's your best place for all your sportsbook needs. They got great lines, Heisman odds. They've got playoff odds, all kind of information on there. Make sure you go check it out, as you mentioned, on the website.
Thank you, my guy. It's always a pleasure. Have a great weekend, okay?
You got it, Spence. Enjoy the games.
All right. Danny Cannell, Dusty and Danny in the mornings, Cover 3 podcast every single week. And he's brought to you today by our friends at betonline.ag. Check betonline.ag for updated college football playoff, conference, Heisman, and Week 10 lines. Danny was a great college quarterback at Florida State, spent some time in the NFL, about 7 years with the Giants, the Falcons, and the Denver Broncos. He was drafted by the Brewers out of high school. Ended up playing for the Yankees for a while. If we had more time, I was going to ask him about the Yankees just peeing down their leg last night. My gosh. Extremely embarrassing. We have SportsCenter on in the studio, so I have to relive Aaron Judge dropping a fly ball that your 8-year-old son could have caught. It was just ridiculous. So we're going to catch a quick break, and then we'll bring in Sports Court coming up next. Our friends from Handy and Handy. In the 5 o'clock hour, we'll get back to some college and pro football. Thursday Night Football is tonight. It is the Jets and the Texans. Let's bring in Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Whether it's your cable television or your cell phone, wireless options, internet too, you probably have seen a lot of prices rise. So Ryan has affordable options for all three of those dynamics. What's going on, Ryan?
We sure do. And, this has been a fun one because so many cool offers right now. And listen, we're talking about triple play. So think about this in the grand scheme of things. What are you spending on your TV? What are you spending on your internet? And what are you spending on your wireless bill? And this is a lot of people's bills. This is a lot of money. And we have the ability to save you like $200-$300 a month. And this is crazy how well this works. Promotions are super clean right now, simple and easy, 2-year price guarantee, movie channels, multi-sports pack, NFL Red Zone free for a year. And guys, you get Netflix free for 2 years right now when you sign up with Dish. Guys, that's like $330 right there alone. Plus internet. Guys, look at your internet bill. You probably didn't notice, but it just went up 18-20%. And most likely, we can actually put you on the exact same service for 20% cheaper. So you could save money there very easily. Fiber is definitely a great example on that because a lot of that's deregulated. Use the same fiber that's coming to your house, but just pay your bill to a different provider. And guys, the wireless, it's the same thing. Boost Mobile's building out this super high-end 5G network, but as they're building it out, they're actually piggybacking on the biggest wireless network provider in the nation. I can't say the name, but you probably guess it. It starts with the alphabet. Here's the thing. You are probably using this provider, and you're probably spending $30 or so per month more per line. And if you're a family of 4 or 5, guys, that adds up quick. You can switch to Boost, get unlimited talk, text, everything, and a brand new iPhone 16 or iPhone 16 Pro or the new Samsung free. So this is a tremendous savings. Call us up. It's simple and easy. We'll just tell us what you need, tell us what you want. We'll get you the prices, and you can start saving right now. You just got to call us, 424-DISH, 801-424-DISH.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Professionals. More of The Drive coming up next right here on ESPN 700. All righty, it is Sports Court. We do it every Thursday, right about now, with our good friends over at Handy, Garrett, and Preston. Happy Halloween, gentlemen. How we doing?
Hey, Spence. Happy Halloween.
Hey, Spence.
I appreciate the time as always. Let's start with a local story, a Juan Diego senior. Here we go. Zach Samakowski. I have no idea. Did the best I could. He has won a temporary restraining order in a suit against the Utah High School Sports Association. All right, fill us in. What's going on here?
Yeah, before we get to it, we were really hoping there'd be a legal issue with the fans out there in right field trying to pull Mookie Betts' hand off.
Yeah.
We hope there's a legal issue there at some point. But we're going to call him Zach. So we've talked about this issue a little bit. A while back, the Utah High School Athletic Association enacted a rule called the F1 student visa rule. And the reason behind it was they felt that some foreign students were coming from other countries, coming for maybe the purpose of just playing athletics at a school, and it gave some schools an uncompetitive advantage. So they passed this rule, and what the rule basically said was, if you're in on an F1 student visa, you are limited to playing, I don't care how good you are, you're limited to playing JV, and you cannot play, if your school goes to the playoffs, you can't play it. So it limited the school. If you had a really talented player, it limited the school. Well, what happened was this Zach at Juan Diego, and I'm not even sure what position he played. We were wondering if he's a punter like Wisnowski, but he looks like a pretty big kid. Well, his parents, they went and got a lawyer, and they filed a motion in federal district court requesting a temporary restraining order. And what a temporary restraining order, or TRO, is, it basically it puts in place, the court issues an order where they say, this rule right now, you can't implement it, or you're not going to be able to put it in place. So they argued, what was argued was they felt that it was unconstitutional, and the court actually agreed with them. And so they granted the TRO, and the court came out and said, we think there's a strong likelihood that the student visa eligibility rule is unconstitutional. And so they granted the TRO, and the interesting part is this only applies to Zach, not across the board, other players that are limited by this rule. It only applies to him because he went in there saying, hey, this is unfair to me. So basically what it says is, we're a couple weeks out on this. He could play in that Thursday night's game. It came out Thursday, and they said you can play in Thursday night's game and you can play after the playoffs. And I guess we got to check to see if Juan Diego's in the playoffs.
All right, Garrett, over to you, buddy.
Well, they are in the playoffs. They've got a game tomorrow against Richfield, so I would expect he's probably going to play. But I think what's a little bit interesting here is, I mean, there's not really a dispute about what the High School Athletics Association was trying to do here. I mean, they did say that's the rule, saying we're going to treat these students differently, right? These students from out of state or out of the country versus our Utah student kids, they're going to get treated differently on who gets to play and when. And so maybe not super unsurprising that the judge found that may be unconstitutional.
All right, moving over to a case we covered when it happened. It's the situation with the Philadelphia Eagles and that railing that collapsed and the lawsuit that was filed. I guess there's an update. Fill us in here.
Yeah, this was in January of 2022. So it's been, I guess we're coming on about 3 years. It was the Eagles versus Commanders, and a group of fans went, and after the Eagles won, they went down by the tunnel where the players are heading into the locker room, trying to give a high five or whatever, and this railing collapsed. And several of these fans fell, some of them about 10 feet, and were injured. And as you can expect, a lawsuit resulted, a personal injury lawsuit. And so the way the Commanders have responded to this is to invoke the arbitration provision clause that is attached to the ticket. And so that's been the dispute that's been going on as to whether or not these fans could be forced into arbitration. The background is, one guy bought 8 tickets for family and friends like you do on the secondary market, and then transferred the tickets to his friends and family who ended up going to the game. And so his argument is, hey, when I went on Ticketmaster and bought these tickets, I never agreed to an arbitration provision. These terms and conditions were never presented to me or explained to me. And so it went through the district court who agreed with that position, and then the Commanders appealed that now to the Fourth Circuit, and so they've reversed that and said no, this we think you were presented with that, and the arbitration provision is going to apply. So I think we're just seeing how strong, especially the NFL, we talk about it all the time with arbitration, but how strong these arbitration provisions are, and that they are going to seek to enforce these every time they can.
All right, Preston, you're up, buddy.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a growing area of the law, and there's no doubt that Spence, you, Garrett, and I, we've all bought things where there was potentially an arbitration clause in there. So read the fine print. You know, you can't think that, oh, God, if I get injured in the game, I'm going to be bound by a ticket that was bought electronically. And I don't know if I was familiar with it, but a big case came out against Disney where a guy and his family was down at Disney, and they were at a restaurant, and he died from some poisoning or infection. He had a reaction to some food, and he died. They brought a wrongful death suit against Disney, and guess what? Disney said, well, because you bought Disney Plus, a temporary Disney Plus thing, and now you're here, you're bound by the arbitration clause. And there was a public outcry. And what Disney did, they backed off that. So they're going to let that go to court. So these things are going to be more, I think, more common as we go.
All right, another story that we followed when it broke and a continued update is the latest with Mel Tucker and his former employer, Michigan State. What's the latest here?
Yeah, so the facts behind it, you know, we know that Mel Tucker was there and he had a humongous contract, $95 million. Well, he was let go for facts that came to light where he was involved in some inappropriate stuff with a consultant with the team. And, so the school dug into it, and they kind of got into some Title IX stuff, and they fired him. And they said they fired him for cause. And we've talked about this a lot on Sports Court. Contracts have things in them where it says, if you're fired for cause, you're done. You don't get your money. And Michigan State's contract, it's interesting. It says, in Michigan State's reasonable judgment, if the conduct would tend to bring disrespect, contempt, or ridicule upon their university. So it's basically saying if what we think does. So somebody made a mistake and let him sign that contract. So, he filed a lawsuit, and his lawsuit involved claims of breach of contract, obviously, and he also claimed defamation, but he also filed some constitutional claims saying his civil rights were violated, basically alleging that that white coaches had been treated differently when there had been some allegations or inappropriate things happening. They were not let go like he would. So, the facts, those are the facts, and those are the things we want to hear about. But right now what's going on is not too really cool. But the Michigan State has come in and they filed a motion to dismiss, basically saying, even if the facts that you allege them are, you're still not going to be able to prevail. So they've gone to the court and said, just dismiss this and we'll be done with it. And the court has looked at it and said, they've looked at it, and I guess Mel's attorneys came in and said, well, wait a minute, here's what we said, and, and we think we can prevail on it. So the court's going to allow him to amend his complaint and kind of perfect it and put in the allegations that I think would probably support, him overcoming this motion to dismiss. A lot of these times, like we're just talked about in the arbitration clause case, we don't ever really get to the facts because there's all this procedural stuff going on before we can kind of get to the facts and see if the case is going to go to arbitration or to trial and see if someone prevails. But we're dealing with this procedural stuff. All
right, Garrett, over to you, buddy.
Well, I think it is just going to come down to how that clause in his contract is interpreted. And as Preston pointed out, I mean, it's going to be subjective, right? I mean, did his conduct bring public disrespect, contempt, or ridicule upon the university? And I think it's probably hard to argue that it didn't. But that's the kind of mountain he's got to climb here.
So I'm glad that you guys included this next one because I don't think it's getting enough attention, or maybe I'm just an NBA basketball nerd. There's always been something a little bit off as far as the way Kawhi Leonard has been handled ever since he left San Antonio. And I've heard things as bizarre as, like, the Clippers didn't even know he had knee surgery at one point. Like, it's a really weird thing. Obviously, it's a bummer that he's never been able to stay healthy, but there's a lawsuit that's been filed by a former employee of the Clippers who I guess knows Kawhi. I don't know. You guys are the experts, but it's a really interesting story. Give us the latest.
Yeah, it is. And he does, this former employee, he does know Kawhi very well. He was, in fact, his trainer at San Diego State and developed a real good relationship with him even after he got drafted and was at San Antonio and Toronto, and had stayed in touch with him and had done off-season workouts with Kawhi. And so he felt like he had the kind of the right regimen and training schedule to keep him healthy. And so what happened is the Clippers kind of caught wind of this relationship. This is what the allegation in the lawsuit is anyway. They caught wind of this relationship and used this trainer as sort of some, an incentive to get Kawhi to sign with the Clippers. And so once he does, and then, he's got this protocol in place, and part of that involves not having Kawhi play in back-to-back games and just kind of this idea of load management and taking care of these injuries. So he ends up getting terminated, and he's brought this lawsuit, a wrongful termination case. And part of this is saying, hey, you guys didn't take my advice on how to handle Kawhi. And, in fact, you went against it, and it resulted in injuries to him and, has caused all these problems. So, I mean, it's kind of an interesting angle that he's taking in response. The Clippers are saying, well, okay, we paid you out according to your employment contract. We haven't done anything. This is really just now a shakedown from you to embarrass us and bring up all these things about how we've managed this player. You're right, Spence. I mean, it'll be an interesting case to follow.
All right, Preston, you're up, bud.
Not much other than the fact that, if we get into this, the NBA, I mean, it might have tentacles that go into the NBA and the NBA Players Association as they look at this and the whole mess with Kawhi. This guy's saying he was retaliated against for the advice he gave to the team, and they said, we took it seriously, but we're not going to do that. So it has far-reaching implications.
All right, final one for today, the situation with Jamison Williams, the Lions wide receiver, who I guess was stopped but not arrested. What's the latest here before I set you loose?
Yeah, this is we're talking about a non-arrest right now. And what happened was he and his brother were driving along, and they were pulled over for speeding. Jamison was a passenger, and they had some firearms in their car, and, they explained to the police that they had them, but Jamison did not have a concealed permit to carry the firearm, so he was pulled out. He was, I don't know if he was cuffed, but he was taken back and put in the car, and he was let go and not arrested, and nothing happened. So now what's happening is the Detroit Police Department, their internal affairs is investigating, and the head of it, the commander said, I feel like there was probable cause to arrest him based on what was going on, and that he should have been taken to the Detroit Detention Center. And it's interesting, they said that Williams was heard on the cam saying, hey, I play for the Lions, and this cannot be on my name. So the question they're looking at is, was he let go because he was on the Detroit Lions? And so the legal issues are they're looking into why he wasn't arrested. And I think what we really ought to look at is if these officers that pulled him over are going to have front row seats to the Detroit game this coming weekend.
Well said. All right, Garrett, final word is yours.
Well, I did read that one of the officers did have a Detroit Lions, this is true, screensaver on his phone. And so apparently is a fan. Kind of different than the officers in Miami, though, right? That would not let Tyreek Hill get to the game, So, hey, they're just cheering for their team.
All right, before I set you loose, for any of our listeners who have legal questions, how do they get a hold of you? Over at Handy and Handy.
Yes, Spence, we'd love to hear from anyone out there. We specialize in the area of personal injury. If you've got any issue, we'll serve as a legal resource and put you in the right direction. But if you have a case that we can handle, give us a call. Give us a call at 801-264-6677 or visit our website at handylawutah.com. Learn about us there. Submit your questions. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a safe Halloween. And as always, go Utes.
Go Utes.
Go Utes.
All right, Garrett and Preston Handy. Now we bring in Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Give him a call, 801-424-DISH. Cell phone, cable, internet. Save money. Ryan, what's going on?
Yeah, save money and get the most reliable service out there. I know a bunch of people went through a little bit of headache and wasn't able to watch the World Series. And guys, satellite is the most reliable service out there, and Dish is actually has an actual guarantee. And the way the system works, if you're connected to the internet, it actually has a redundancy on there. So if the satellite doesn't work, you actually have the internet as an option. Listen, here's the deal. Call us up. Take advantage of this triple play offer. We're talking TV, internet, and wireless phones. And this is tremendous because we're seeing savings in the $250, $300+ range. Guys, there is so many cool offers right now with Dish that we've got stacked where you can get not only the 2 years worth of credits, the price is guaranteed not to change for 2 years, movie channels, multi-sports pack, which includes the NFL Red Zone, free for a year. But, guys, how about Netflix free for 2 years? Guys, that's over $370, just that alone. And most of us have Netflix, and you get it free for 2 years. That's just extra money in your pocket. And then on the internet side, if you haven't noticed your internet bill, it probably went up 18, 20%. Call us. We can lower it back down. We can lower that bill. And a lot of times with fiber, you can use the same actual fiber and just pay a different provider and pay less money. And it's the same thing with cell phone service. Boost Mobile is building out this unbelievably awesome 5G network. But during their build-out, they're actually piggybacking on the biggest wireless provider in the nation's towers. And I can't tell you the name, but you can probably guess. It starts with the first letter in the alphabet. Here's the thing. You can use the same cell phone towers and just pay your bill to somebody else. And with Boost right now, you sign up, you get a new iPhone 16 Pro free, no trade-in, or the new Samsung, no trade-in, and you'll probably end up spending about $30 a month less per line or more. Call us up. It can equate into a ton of savings for you. You get new equipment, new phones. We'll get you set up immediately and have you installed as early as next day for the satellite. And throw in dinner at JCW's. Call us, 424-DISH, 801-424-DISH.
All right, there he is, Ryan from the Dish Pros. 3 hours down, 1 hour to go. The Drive at 5 is next, right here on ESPN 700. Very happy Halloween to you as the 5 o'clock hour of the drive on a Thursday gets rolling right now. Looks like we could have a little rain potentially. There are dark clouds here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. A little rain this morning, snow up in the mountains. But as it is every day, we appreciate you making us a part of your daily routine, whether you're listening in the radio, whether you're checking out our stream online, ESPN700sports.com, our mobile app, or maybe even our podcast, too. We appreciate you guys certainly on this Thursday. Be safe out there. Don't be the family that leaves the bowl of candy out and says, please just take one, because you'll run into 8-year-olds like a young Spence Checketts who will take all of your candy and go home. Don't do that. Give out the full-size candy bars. We had Gordon Monson earlier. That's the deal. But most importantly, stay safe, have fun. It's been fun to see everybody rolling around in their costumes here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. Some of the costumes got a little loose, I'm not going to lie. But 5 o'clock hour, the drive is brought to you by Flanker. Get game day ready at Flanker Kitchen and Sporting Club at the Gateway, your ultimate destination for pro and college football watch parties. Follow at Flanker SLC on socials for exclusive game day specials, and more reservations can be made at flankerslc.com. All right, the Utah Jazz are in action tonight. They're taking on the San Antonio Spurs. Jazz are actually a slight favorite in this game. At this juncture, the Jazz are the only team in the NBA that has not won a basketball game. Of course, there's a lot of attention surrounding the unfortunate news that Taylor Hendricks is going to have his development stunted mightily with just a super horrific, sad leg injury to his looks like it's going to be his ankle and his fibula, but he's out for the year. We'll see when the surgery, kind of comes down. I'm told that it hasn't happened yet. They're probably still trying to analyze what's best. But at this point, the Spurs do have one win, but San Antonio's not a great team. But it is worth the price of admission if you have never seen Victor Wembanyama play. I mean, it really is unlike anything I've seen before. You've heard all the analysts talk about it. He is, by any measurable metric, no matter kind of what you rely on, most people believe he's the best prospect to play NBA basketball since LeBron James, and the best prospect to build an NBA team around, because San Antonio a couple of years ago did the thing that the Jazz did not, and they did the right thing when there was a generational player available. Wembanyama is 20 years old. He and Taylor Hendricks are the very same age. And San Antonio, by going all in on being bad, including trading DeJounte Murray, a 25-year-old all-star, for not much of anything in return, knew that even if it meant you had a slight shot at Wembanyama, you had to go all in on losing games and, quote, developing young players. Where have we heard that? Oh, this year. That's right. From the Jazz, right? So I talked about it that season. Moving off Murray, they played bizarre lineups. Greg Popovich was like trolling everybody. But their whole ethos that year was, Wembanyama is so special, we at least want to give ourselves a shot at him. Now, the lottery odds have been flattened. Ask Detroit, there's no guarantee that if you're the worst team in the NBA, you get the worst pick. Ask Atlanta, there's a chance that if you're 10, you might move up to 1. It does happen from time to time. But ultimately, I don't know that the Jazz are doing this intentionally, because they would never say it out loud. And as I've said often, I feel like it's a day late and a dollar short. But if they are finally going about their business, because again, what's the verbiage we hear from the front office? What's the verbiage we hear, from the powers that be, the decision makers? This year is going to be all about development. And essentially that's code in the NBA for, hey guys, just so you know, we're going to be really bad this year. And while I do believe the best time to do this would have been 2 years ago, if you're going to move off Mitchell and Gobert, and very smart front office basketball people have decided they didn't want to work for this new iteration of whatever this is. Dennis Lindsey leaves. Quinn Snyder leaves. The time to do this was then, and it did coincide with Wembanyama bursting on everybody's scene as the best young building block that is emerged since LeBron James. And for whatever reason, they didn't. And I've heard a bunch of excuses that I don't buy at all. Like I heard somebody say, well, we were trying to tank, but our coach is too good. To which I respond, who coaches the Spurs? Like, there's nothing there. And so the best time to do this would have been 2 years ago, but the second best time to do it is now. And so if they're doing it intentionally behind the scenes, let me say congratulations, because this is exactly what you need to be doing. I will say this. we had Craig Bolerjack, Gordon Monson live in studio, and Bowler's a pro. He's going to do the deal to the best of his ability, and he's going to make sure that, he does a great job. But this is hard on the team. It's hard on the players. It's really hard on the coach. Coaches never want to lose it all. But remember, let's draw some parallels here. Let's draw some dotted lines, because I can tell you, as somebody who's been in media for a long time, but it's also been on the team side, what you hear from teams is not the deal. That's why they have communication staffs. That's why they have emergency PR meetings to make sure what? What is our messaging? What are we telling the community? It's very rare that you get from the team exactly what's going on behind the scenes. So you hear what they say to the media, you hear what they say during interviews, and then you kind of have to do the best you can to connect the dots behind the scenes to understand exactly what's going on. It's not a coincidence that they picked up Will Hardy's 5th year about 3 weeks ago. Now, remember, this is Will's 3rd year. His 4th-year option had already been exercised, but they picked up his 5th-year option a few weeks ago. There are probably a number of reasons for it, but the timing certainly struck me. It's not something that happens often in pro basketball. Reason number one is Will's very bright. And anybody who's ever been around him, and we've had interviews, Jeff Van Gundy coached with Will Hardy, USA Basketball, Steve Kerr, who said the Jazz just signed a rising star. Like, it feels to be a consensus that one of very few pieces that you have in place that appear to be the correct decision, it's your head coach. So number one is you just lock in a guy you like an awful lot. Okay, so that's what they did. But ultimately, if early season returns are any indicator, and I'm going to get here in a moment, because it's not just the losing, it's the way the Jazz are losing, that says to me, okay, they have done their due diligence on this upcoming draft class that includes a bevy of prospects that people are very excited about, none the least of which is a young freshman. Not that you need an excuse to watch Duke basketball, because ESPN essentially shows us all of their games, whether we want them or not. But if you have a chance to tune in, college basketball can be a rough product to watch, not going to lie. But Cooper Flagg, the freshman from Duke, you guys have heard the name by now. There's a great piece in The Athletic where a writer, an NBA writer that works for The Athletic, spent a couple of weeks with Cooper Flagg and his family and talking to a bunch of talent evaluators and scouts in pro basketball. I'm going to stop short of saying a Wembanyama gift or a Wembanyama, infusion of hope. Because what prospects like Victor Wembanyama and LeBron James, who are generational, what they do is they change communities. They really do. They change cities. We saw it with LeBron in Cleveland, the positive effect he had on his community, and you will see it in San Antonio, because ultimately, guys like that, you don't miss on them, and you don't miss on a chance just to maybe luck into getting them. You just don't. It's bad management. It's bad decision-making, and I think that's what the Jazz did 2 years ago. But if Cooper Flagg is thought to be, look, if you guys, kind of keep up with the pulse of NBA basketball and you read about the draft stuff, and my guess is a lot of Jazz fans do, you hear names like Dylan Harper, Ron Harper's kid who's going to be for Rutgers. And by the way, his teammate Ace Bailey, what's going on at Rutgers, by the way? His teammate Ace Bailey is also thought to be a generational piece. Nolan Traore, who's a French international kid. VJ Edgecombe from Baylor, Trey Johnson from Texas, Drake Powell from Carolina. Like, you hear people, and there's a kid who plays for Real Madrid, Hugo Gonzalez, Liam McNeely, who's at UConn. You hear people talk about this draft, that if you have one of the top 6 or 7 picks, you're going to potentially have a generationally special player. You did not hear that about the draft last year, which leads me to this draft pick that continues to be floated out there as something that inevitably at some point we'll have to convey. Okay, so it's the same deal this year. If it's top 10 protected. So if the Jazz, if it's out of the top 10, the Jazz have to send that pick to Oklahoma City, which makes me laugh every time, because OKC might be the best team in the West. Nobody's close to Boston. OKC might be the best team in the West, but they also are as well positioned to add talent as anyone in the league, including the Jazz, who are not even close to living in the same stratosphere, in the same cul-de-sac as where OKC finds themselves. San Antonio still in a tremendous position to surround Victor Wembanyama with talent as he ages because of all their draft capital and relatively clean books, right? But San Antonio has already found the thing that the Jazz are still looking for. And I love Lauri Markkanen. We all love Lauri Markkanen. If you're heading down to the Jazz game tonight, chances are one of the main reasons you bought your ticket is to watch Markkanen play. I think he's going tonight. He did leave the other night with some back issues. I think Craig said he was game time decision, so we'll have to see if Markkanen goes. And certainly it'll be fun to watch Walker Kessler, Victor Wembanyama. But my point in the whole thing is a year ago when the draft wasn't great and the early returns of even the Rishache kid and some of the high draft picks so far, not awesome. The question is, why didn't you allow the pick to convey? Toronto did it last year. I think it was the pick they had in the Jakob Poeltl trade, I think, with San Antonio. And it was set to convey, and they did their calculations. And they decided to, and this is the thing. You guys know this. You watched it last year. The Jazz started sitting players here or there because they clearly wanted to maintain their draft capital. But at the same time, if the draft last year wasn't going to breed anybody all that special and you have to convey the pick at some point, why don't you do it in a year that's bad? Because and look, it does look like the Jazz are going to be in a position to hold on to it because it'll be top 10 and maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, man, have we earned it in this market to get Lady Luck smiling down upon us in the NBA draft lottery process. Maybe you rise up to a top 2 or 3 pick. Can we even dream that you get to number 1? Well, here's the thing. If the Jazz are really doing, because back to the whole dynamic of hearing the front office tell people what they're doing and then watching the actual proof of concept. Yes, you hear them talk about development, but development is code in pro basketball for we're not going to be very good this year, so please ride with us. And I would say to you as the fan base and as somebody who cheers for the Jazz just like you do, if this is the plan, embrace it with both arms. Embrace it with open arms, man. Like, if they're finally doing the thing that they should have been doing for the past couple of years after Quinn and Dennis left and they traded Gobert and Mitchell and Conley and Bogdanovich and Royce and everybody. I mean, they jettisoned that entire group. And, yes, we can go into whether or not the well had run dry. Most people say the answer to that is yes. I still question whether or not that's the case. But regardless, that is the direction that I believe they should have taken right away. If you're going to rebuild, go all in and do what you got to do to make sure that you can, suffer through the pain. Because what you don't want is 10 straight years of 35 to 40 wins, And then what are you exactly? And then what do you have to utilize to add talent? In this market, it has to be draft. It has to be draft, develop, and retain. And honestly, sometimes I think that's overhyped about it only being a Salt Lake team or a Salt Lake thing. Golden State, essentially, they drafted Steph, Clay, and Draymond. Yes, they added Durant, and that was unfair, and that will never happen here. But the spine of that team was draft, develop, retain, right? So bottom line, if this, and it does appear that this is going to be a really, really long, hard year for Jazz fans, team employees, players, coaches, if the long game does actually shine upon the Jazz the way it shined upon San Antonio 2 years ago, and the Jazz finally get that lady luck ball to bounce their way, and Cooper Flagg is in a Jazz uniform this year or next year, go 0-82. Okay, because this essentially will give you some hope. Because right now it's a team, and it's hard to have a lot of hope in them, the bottom line. So we'll see. If you're heading down, enjoy the Victor Wembanyama show. Like I said, I've never seen anything like him. All right, I want to tell you about my friends at Overtime Cards and Collectibles. It is the best spot for all your football, basketball, hockey, MMA, and even Pokemon trading card collecting. Buy all your favorites there and even take your cards in. Maybe you have some rare cards in your collection you don't even know about. My guy Chris out there found out that I had a Kobe Bryant rookie card in my big old box of cards that I've been hauling around for like 20 years. And he's got crazy stories about guys that'll roll in there with boxes of cards. He uncovers like a great baseball card worth like $30,000 that was just sitting there and you didn't know it. So if you have those cards, head in. Also, start thinking about the holidays, what gifts you need to get for your friends and loved ones. Why not an Overtime Cards gift card? It's the perfect stocking stuffer. They have all the best trading cards and collectibles around. Go check them out online at overtimecardsandcollectibles.com where you can buy and trade. All right, more coming up next on this Halloween Thursday on ESPN 700.